Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
A Revealed Past by LyricalPiece. After docking at a new island, the Straw Hats are captured by a group of scientists who want to extract their memories to farm information. Realizing Sanji is a Vinsmoke, the scientists believe his memories are the key to stealing Germa's advanced technology. The cook's secrets of his past are revealed on screen, and his crew have a hard time accepting what they're seeing. Adios.
Nobody could believe what they were seeing. It was like a bad dream. A nightmare where reality had a different set of rules. Where you ran in slow motion when you were being chased. Where your limbs felt like lead when you were trying to swim. What their minds were telling them now wasn't feasible, illogical, impossible. The kimono-clad geisha winced at Sanji's feet, the wound on her head bruising around the blood. Sanji took a step back. No, it couldn't have been his doing. When Sanji remained frozen, petrified in his shock as his mind reeled to fit the blank pieces together, the woman took the opportunity to flee. Sanji let her for only a moment before he moved to follow. He needed to make sure she was okay. Whatever had hit her had nothing to do with him. Even being the only other person in that hallway, the Straw Hats warred with Sanji's reality, because there was no way Sanji would lay a single finger on a woman. Yet, Luffy's observation was correct. The swirl of his brows swept left instead of right, and that was different and wrong. And did that mean Sanji himself was different and wrong? Zoro stared, horrified at his partner's equally horrified expression on screen. He had only just shown up, after all. Whoever or whatever harmed the woman was probably too fast, Sanji figured. He only didn't catch it because he wasn't paying attention. Didn't expect a civilian in the hallway. It made him a disgrace no matter what, but there was no way he had struck. Fuck, he couldn't even think it. Are you sure his eyebrows are facing the opposite direction they usually do? Usopp asked, voice strained. The sniper squinted. How can you even tell? How can you tell? Frankie repeated, stupefied. You spent years with him on a ship, bro. I'm not focused on anyone's eyebrows. How can eyebrows just change directions? Chopper whispered urgently, pupils shivering. That can't happen to humans. Maybe Queen was onto something when he had said humans couldn't just set their legs on fire, either. But no, Chopper had treated Sanji and his injuries plenty of times to know how normal his body was. Well, he used to. It was moot now if it was changing, if it had changed. All Sanji could think about was the fear in her eyes. The way she cringed away from him. Nervous, the little doctor glanced at present-day Sanji. Do you think his eyebrows are still? Did they change back or? Everyone was looking now, but the neural headpiece covered Sanji's eyebrows. They couldn't tell. Couldn't even remember their direction now that the situation called for them to. Except Zoro. Hey, everything on his face is just how it should be. Don't start doubting the cook now. What if he hurt that woman? Zoro. Nami threw her hands up. That's not Sanji. What the hell are you implying? Which? Nami's voice lowered. I'm not blaming him, okay? I'm just worried. Sanji didn't hit her, Luffy said. Serious, doesn't matter what's wrong with him. He'd never do that. Can we know for certain? Brook questioned carefully. His body is obviously different. And as we know, Robin added, Judge's work doesn't only affect them physically, but also mentally. Who's to say his mind isn't also changing? Nobody said anything. Even wanting to protest, Zoro knew he couldn't. Knew they were just as concerned about this as he was, and lashing out at them wouldn't do anybody any good. But, fuck, if things weren't clicking into place in his head. That idiot hadn't told him a goddamn thing, and if it was really this bad, shouldn't he have said something? Maybe her fear came from noticing him afterward, and thinking he was one of Kaido's lackeys, too. Yeah, that made sense. Whatever the case was, it definitely wasn't because of him. The Straw Hats remained uncertain, but, God, they clung to his reasonings as strongly as he was. Knew Sanji was trying to convince himself more than anyone. If Sanji actually hit a woman, by any means, he would never forgive himself. The cherry-pink geisha turned into a room where Sanji could hear a gaggle of women now murmuring over the girl. You're bleeding, an older woman cried. By her tone, the wound must be worse than Sanji thought. Who did this to you? Miss. Sanji nearly collided with the doorway as it framed his silhouette. Are you alright? Let me help you?" The pink woman flinched at his voice, then cowered away from him. Her friends reacted instantly. The other geishas blocked her from Sanji's view while pointing accusing fingers. "You, how dare you attack this poor girl? You call yourself a man?" Sanji's eyes widened. He held his palms up placatingly, furiously shaking his head. "Please, you've got this wrong, I would never." "We don't want your excuses, you're fighting on the side of Wano, aren't you?" "Of course I am." "Then you're doing this to your own people." They sounded disgusted. It made Sanji sick. "He wouldn't have done it no matter what side they were on," Luffy said, matter of fact. "Listen to me. I don't know what happened to her. I just showed up and—" Sanji hesitated. Gritted his teeth. He didn't know what happened, so he didn't have the proof to defend himself either. All he had was that it felt horribly wrong. The women, still barricading their friend, raised their various weapons, prepared to defend. I didn't do anything." Sanji pleaded for them to understand. To listen. "I didn't lay a finger on her. I don't know." "If you're so innocent, then why did she run? Monsters who beat up innocent girls are not welcome here." Sanji couldn't feel his legs. He zeroed in on the whimpering girl they were protecting from him. Their angry stares and judgmental words would haunt him forever. "I swear this wasn't me." He stepped forward, desperate to prove to himself that this was all some sick joke. "I promise you." "Shut up." A vase was chucked at him. The porcelain shattered against Sanji's lowered head. Chopper gasped. The women didn't understand the situation, didn't know Sanji as a person, so nobody could hold their actions against them. But it still made Chopper feel sad. "Get out of here," the women cried. "Go, haven't you done enough?" "Go on. Leave." "Poor Sanji," Brook said. Regardless of the eluding truth of what happened, Sanji's in his right mind in this moment. And such accusations against ideals he holds so highly can't be pleasant. It was one thing for the cook to fear something irreversible was happening to him, Zoro figured. But having those same fears verbalized accusingly by others made things worse, which was something the cook couldn't seem to escape. Intentional by them or not, there were always people rubbing faults in his face. Zoro wasn't going to pretend Curly hadn't had a point when he said the universe seemed to be constantly laughing in his face. His character's getting massacred, Frankie agreed. That's a super rough reality to grasp for a guy like Sanji. Blonde hair shadowing his face, Sanji backed out of the room as more projectiles were thrown at him. One slow step at a time. Mumbling more to himself than anybody. "Please, I wouldn't, I couldn't." Chopper's eyes watered at how dejected the man looked. Once back in the hallway, the door was slammed shut in his face. "This isn't happening." Sanji remained stiff, eyes stinging as he walked away warring with himself. "I would never lay a hand on a lady." There was no explaining it. No explaining it in a way that Sanji could comprehend. Unless this wasn't some twisted joke. He'd already noticed the changes, hadn't he? And his body wasn't tingling anymore, so maybe it already happened. Sanji raised his hands to stare at his gloved fingers. They felt like they should be trembling, but they weren't. "Hey, Germa boy," Queen appeared, rather suddenly, at the end of the hall. "Fu and Yu," he cackled. Only Sanji could have an existential crisis in the middle of a battle, Usopp muttered, partly amused, but mostly worried. Sanji wasn't listening. Knew he was CHTS when he ran into that girl. It had taken him a second to notice her, and then, she went flying. Then she was bleeding. She looked at me with fear in her eyes. Like he was some sort of monster, and… No way. He yelled to himself. That's the last thing I would do. I would never hurt a woman. He trailed off as his subconscious threw a new image into his head. In front of him was the pink geisha, but as she cowered her hair turned strawberry blonde. Her kimono twirled into a chef's skirt and apron. And even as her face was now spotted tastefully with light freckles, the fear in her eyes never changed. It wasn't the geisha anymore. It was the head chef of Germa who had also faced the wrath of a Vinsmoke, Cosette. And Niji, Sanji would never hurt a woman, but he would. They would. His brothers would beat a lady unconscious with no hesitation nor glance back, except maybe to laugh. And it all disgusted Sanji to his core. Because earlier he'd assured himself there was no proof he was turning into something monstrous, and now he wasn't so sure. "You're telling me I'm gonna end up like them?" His crew couldn't imagine it. Especially after all they'd seen. How could their kind cook ever turn into that? However, they'd also seen his disoriented body. They'd witnessed his physical changes, and if there was no other explanation for the woman's fall. What was the point of it all, then? His mother's sacrifice, Reiju's guilt, Zeph's selflessness, the Straw Hat's care, Luffy's resolve. Why did any of them have to deal with his fucked up life if it was going to be pointless in the end? Why had he fought so hard if it was going to end up biting him in the ass anyway? The Straw Hats listened with pinched brows and sharp frowns. They felt frustrated on their cook's behalf. "You ain't getting away," Queen sang, watching the Straw Hat chef inquisitively as he clanged his claws and stretched his long neck to and fro. "So you might as well bust out those Germa powers before it's too late." Too late, the words sank deep into Sanji's thoughts like a terminal disease. An inevitable curse with only a single outcome. Maybe it was already too late. Maybe there was already no going back. Zoro's stomach sank. It couldn't be true. The cook was too strong, too stubborn to let himself be turned into somebody else's toy soldier. Come on, tell me you snapped out of whatever the hell this is. If that was the case, if his body was set on activating every mutation it possessed, if he had no control over it now, would it really matter if he used the raid suit again? Wouldn't it make more sense, at this point, to accept the fact he would have these new superhuman powers at the cost of his humanity, and that would be that? No, Chopper wept. Wasn't he fine after Onigashima? The reindeer suddenly leapt and latched onto Luffy's face, shaking him back and forth. Tell me he wasn't acting weird and I didn't notice. Petit swore he was F-wine, came Luffy's muffled response. Do you think they knew using the raid suit could activate his dormant genes when they slipped it into Luffy's pocket in the first place? Usopp wondered, thinking about it. Like, they promised to leave him alone, but if his mutations started working he'd be more inclined to go back to them himself one day. Well, there's a bone-chilling thought, Brook said. Zoro's bones seemed to concur with that, but he quickly shook the feeling off. Ain't no way, the swordsman said. Curly humiliated them on whole cake. Those pathetic losers wanted nothing more than to humiliate him right back. Even if they suspected it could be a possibility, I believe Zoro is right, Robin said. Sanji displayed a superiority to Germa 66, as well as publicly disowning the Vinsmokes as his family. It's more likely they wanted to send him off with a reminder that his blood belongs to them. But I suppose there's no way of knowing for certain. It's best to remain cautious. Especially with how misfortune seems to favor our cook. At that, Zoro couldn't argue. You got lucky once, Queen was taunting, but without that suit you won't last long against me. The bastard could say what he wanted. Sanji wasn't losing. His crew was counting on him. It was why he had used the suit in the first place, wasn't it? For his friends, to support his captain. That was all that mattered. He swore he'd never let them down again, and he meant every goddamn word. So, if continuing to use Germa's power would help them. The Straw Hat's eyes widened. No, Zoro cursed, thinking about their pact. Don't tell me that twirly idiot used it again after all that. Sanji lowered his head and closed his eyes, hands sliding into his pockets. Hey, Luffy, the captain tensed. Everyone stilled. What kind of man do you want on your crew? Which version of me do you want around? The unreliable dreamer who's afraid of his own power. Who's useless every time he faces a female enemy? Or the soldier of science who can coldly execute anyone you order me to? Who can dismember a beast like this without a second thought? Who has a heart of ice and a will of steel that never fails? Which would be more useful to the king of the pirates? Luffy's mouth was set in a grim line. Everyone gauged his reaction carefully. They knew what any other pirate captain would probably say to that, but surely theirs would. Sanji doesn't need to change. He thought he'd made that clear already. Yeah. He definitely had. Luffy relaxed, lowering his head with a comforting smile. Sanji, you know the answer. If Sanji's destiny was to be a weapon, he'd rather be one used by the Straw Hat Pirates than Germa 66. A useful tool in their grand fleet. A tool they'd never use just despite Judge's reign over Sanji's life, they all knew. But if Luffy was here to answer his question, would he be shouting at the top of his lungs to a misguided Germa prince who had seemingly deflected because he cared too much? You better come back no matter what, I need you on my crew, Sanji, because without you. Sanji wondered how completely he would change. Wondered, if it continued to take over, how long he had left until he was someone else. Afraid of being imprisoned within Germa's borders was one thing. Being trapped within a Germa soldier's mindset was a prison on a whole other level of hell. Sanji would hurt people, and he wouldn't give a damn. He would stop caring about his friends. Stop being able to love. He would lose everything he had with Zoro. Zoro did not care for this train of thought, not one fucking bit. He would lose his dreams, his passion. Would he even realize, aware of it like Reiju? Or would he be oblivious to his own changed principles? Would he change and believe that was truly who he always was? Or would he remember everything and think himself better for severing those ties? Such a horrible fear, Robin sighed, voicing everyone's solemn thoughts on the whole situation. What if he willingly goes back to Germa? Nami wondered herself. Quiet. Even Reiju can't disobey Judge's orders, right? Wouldn't that mean Sanji wouldn't be able to either? Chopper whined. Then maybe Usopp was right, and Sanji would go looking for them himself? None of this speculation matters, Zoro growled suddenly, ending the conversation. Sanji slowly opened his eyes. He was tired of fighting his past, but he couldn't forget how much of it he had already faced. I don't know what'll happen from here on out, but Sanji pulled the raid suit canister from his suit. I know what I had to do. Queen's eyes lit up in delight. So did already. Come on, you owe me a show after all this teasing. Sanji looked down at the yellow number, 3, with a blank expression. The number that signified the order he was born. The number that remained embedded in his name. When I put this damn thing on, it awakened a power inside me that's been there since I was born. I can't do anything to change that. Sounds like you finally get it. Now, suit up, Germa boy. But what I can do, Sanji interrupted, Eve to hold their incoming protests, is put an end to all of this. Sanji let the canister fall while his knee rose to his chest. The Straw Hats' hearts beat faster. There was a sudden thrill that washed over them, like they could feel their cook's newfound confidence course through their own veins. Luffy needs ME to help him become king of the pirates, and the esteemed chef of the Straw Hat Pirates wasn't born for his strength to be contained in a can. Hard and swift, Sanji's heel came down on the insulting Germa tech, bursting it into a shower of sparks and smoke. Luffy's grin stretched from ear to ear, and Zoro's lopsided smirk was hard to miss. It's over. Sanji glared up at Queen through his lashes, his words falling from his lips in a determined growl. I'll never belong to Germa. I'm choosing my own fate. And I'm gonna finish this fight on my own terms. Frankie, Nami, Usopp, and Chopper sobbed abundant tears of joy. Wahh, Sanji. Luffy's grin never faltered, and his eyes scrunched up. He knew Sanji would know what to do. Knew he was smart enough not to use that crap again. Zoro was still smiling. But destroying it was a nice touch. Good job, twirls. Oh, that's Sanji, Brook sung, as Robin laughed softly. Their hearts, too, were full. Even if only one of them had a heart. Sanji wouldn't risk the technology altering more of him, but however far he was going to end up changing from the few times he'd already used it, well, he couldn't do shit about it. There was no reversing it, either. If it did alter him to the fullest, Vinsmoke Sanji would be returning. No longer a failure. And Black Leg Sanji of the Straw Hat Pirates would die along with his dreams. And, we're bummed again, Usopp uttered with a depressed squiggle above him and the others. But whatever happened, he couldn't be afraid of it anymore. Sanji had spent his whole life scared, always afraid of what came next and if he'd be good enough. But with Luffy and Zoro and the others with them, it didn't matter what came next. He knew he could handle it. But more importantly, he knew that it was okay if he couldn't, because they would be there. Just in case. Bros got me all over the place, Frankie wept into his arms. I don't know whether to be proud or heartbroken, Nami agreed with a wet sniffle. So, if there was even the slightest possibility he wouldn't be himself anymore, that he would turn cold, emotionless, brutal, cruel, a danger to women, a disgrace of a man, if he was to lose himself completely after this, then all he needed was reassurance that his friends would remain safe from his own hands. In such a case, Black Leg Sanji couldn't be the only version of him that needed to die. And there was only one person he could rely on for that. One person who would understand. Only one person Sanji could trust to bear that burden. Huh? What does he mean by all that? Nami demanded. She got a bad feeling in her gut. She wasn't the only one. The Straw Hat Captain turned to stare at his first mate, who stiffened at the realization the rubber man was onto him. Sanji dug through his pockets until he raised up a small mushi. Bada 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 bada. Huh? Who's he calling? Usopp stammered. In the middle of a fight, no less, Frankie added. That took some guts all on its own. Bada 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 ca lick. What the hell? Came the exasperated growl of a very confused swordsman. Since when do I have this thing? All eyes turned to Zoro. A man who was suddenly a little too interested in his fingernails. Even though he answered the call, he was clearly talking to himself. There was some quick rustling, sharp clangs of steel, and then Zoro was growling again. Who the hell is calling me at a time like this? I'm busy. I was afraid you might die in a ditch somewhere. Sanji's cool, raspy voice responded after Zoro had caught his breath again. It was easy to keep things light with the moss head no matter the circumstances. Which was also exactly what he needed right now. So, I snuck that snail on you as a safety precaution. That's actually quite sweet, Robin mused, smirking slightly at a suddenly flustered Zoro. The swordsman recovered himself quickly, however. Oh, yes, Usopp waved comically in the air. Just having a casual chat while fighting two lead performers, the usual. He must have given it to you when he bandaged you up, Chopper guessed. Like a ham, Zoro added, much to the confusion of the others. Then he sighed. There was no avoiding this now. I'm not dying, you idiot, as if despite the swordsman's words, something seemed to jam into his chest, knocking the air from his lungs. He recovered with a heavy huff. Could you leave me alone? Listen, this won't take long. Sanji braced himself for what he was about to ask. The wariness returned to the Straw Hats. I know we got this, Sanji said. We're beating the beast pirates no matter what. Zoro was fighting again. Yeah, he grunted, course we are. But after the battle, Sanji's voice darkened. There's a chance I might not be in my right mind anymore. If that happens, then kill me. Every Straw Hat froze. Some stopped breathing. Not a single muscle moved as minds reeled to process what their ears had just heard. For Zoro, knowing it was coming didn't stop his gut from seizing a second time. Huh? Zoro could barely get out his shock as his movements grew erratic on the other end. His battle had escalated suddenly. Sanji knew it was probably his fault for making him lose focus. This was the last thing Mossy would expect him to ask a favor for. He had just returned from the whole cake ordeal. They had reconnected in a significant way. Everything was supposed to be alright. But despite the timing, or maybe in spite of it, he knew Zoro would understand what he was trusting him to do. Knew he would recognize the severity, the desperation, the impact of what not being himself meant to Sanji. His shitty swordsman would never deny him. Why did that phrasing stir a strange warmth in Zoro's chest? You didn't really agree to that, did you, Zoro? The swordsman blinked at the questioning little reindeer with the roundest doe eyes. For better or worse, the kid would get his answer soon enough. The mosshead's huffs of breath echoed from the other end of the snail, but he didn't answer. Are you still there? Yeah, a gruff response. I got it, I'll kill you, just like you asked. What? Usopp and Chopper shrieked, the doctor immediately wailing, and so casually. What the hell, Zoro? Nami demanded. How could you agree to that? I have my reasons, Zoro mumbled, which are. Tisk. Protecting the crew, for one thing. I'm the first mate, so. So what? You'd kill him because it's your job. No, because it's what Sanji wanted. Zoro's tone silenced them all. All I knew then was that the cook was putting his life in my hands for a reason. Didn't need an explanation at the time. Hardly had time for one, anyway. Zoro knew the risks involved in their lifestyle, and so did Curly. He'd be a hypocrite if he'd refused. A poor excuse for a first mate. And a coward who didn't trust his partner completely in a time of crisis. Nami wasn't having it. Luffy, say something. Tell him how stupid he is, Usopp huffed. Yeah, tell him, Luffy, Chopper joined with an angry pout. Luffy's face was serious, even as his head tilted to the side. Sanji entrusted Zoro with his life, not us. It doesn't matter what we think. Huh? Zoro didn't know what he had expected from his captain, but he supposed he should have known Luffy would understand better than most a pact between men. But Luffy, Chopper's bottom lip quivered. Luffy patted the doctor's head. Sanji isn't giving up, he promised him. He didn't ask this of Zoro because he doesn't value his life. He did it because he values it more than anything. Robin smiled gently. We've seen Sanji's martyrdom, as well as his suicidal ideations. All of which stemmed from his lack of self-worth. But look at him, hair of fate, but Sanji is choosing himself. Sanji's jaw unclenched with relief. A small weight lifted from his shoulders. I don't get what your problem is, Zoro continued. But at least I got something to look forward to. Good, he was also keeping up their usual repertoire. So until then, Zoro's voice had risen, a different air to his timbre, and the resounding pause held more emotion in its silence than Sanji was prepared for. Until then, don't you dare die on me. Nami's eyes softened. She sighed, slumping in defeat. They were right, and she knew it. Zoro loved that idiot, too, after all. Sanji swallowed the lump in his throat. Thank you, and he meant it with every ounce of his heart that he had left. C.A. Lick. I still can't accept that Zoro would kill Sanji, Usopp muttered, a bit shakily. I mean, I get it, but... My job as protector of this crew comes at a price, Zoro said, eye shutting. But don't ever forget Curly is also part of this crew. He is Nakama. If there was any other way, of course I'd fucking take it. You think killing him, by my own swords, wouldn't kill a part of me, too? His vulnerable confession made everyone quiet. Such a rare thing, coming from their stoic swordsman. In that moment, what options did we have? Tell me. He was daring someone to protest again, but this time nobody did. In high-cost situations, the cook and I need to have each other's backs, no matter what. Your unwavering confidence in each other is truly remarkable, Brook hummed. Although I do dread the image of you ever having to go through with that oath. If Zoro was being honest, he hadn't thought much about it since leaving Wano. He brought it up only once, and the cook had waved him off. But if he was changed permanently, if there was a chance he could progress further as time went on, would their death pact always hang over their heads? Perhaps it all depends, Robin interjected, catching the slight apprehension on the otherwise confident swordsman's face. On what happened to Sanji next, as a collective, the Straw Hats concluded that Sanji's life was a constant tornado of turmoil. They could barely keep control of their own emotions watching this all play out, so it was an incredible feat that Sanji himself managed to maintain more composure in his daily life with them when his inner thoughts were nothing but chaos most of the time. It was no wonder the man leaned so heavily on nicotine to try to tame even a semblance of it all. A trait Usopp had grasped at to try to lighten the mood, mentioning that he could smoke all he wanted without worrying about negative health effects now. He tried to laugh, but it came out so forced he might as well hadn't tried at all. The crew watched as Sanji silently put the Den Den Mushi away as if it carried the weight of his world in its shell. After that pact with Zoro, it wasn't a far stretch. Even in thought Sanji was silent after the call. He eased his stance, raised his head, narrowed his eyes at his monstrous opponent with a newfound conviction, and then, he vanished. Startled, Queen began bellowing insults. I don't need you adding fuel to the fire, Sanji's voice rang out as he skywalked faster than the eye could catch. He pounced in circles, gaining momentum in the narrow hallway. 'Cause I'm already burning up. His entire body burst into flames, his shins burning a molten yellow, blinding hot as it connected with Queen's cheek. Hell memories. Sparks flew. Smoke cleared. Sanji straightened, hands back in his pockets. A cool new attack, Luffy offered as another way to lighten the mood. This one at least intrigued enough of them, as they gawked that Sanji's whole body lit up. By its name, it must be a manifestation of his past, Robin noted. Might as well put that negativity to use and power yourself up with it, Frankie commented. He got it, after all. He was a sad slump for a time, was hit by a train, and fixed himself up better than ever in spite of it. Queen, long hair singed and body smoking, started to laugh as he picked himself up. You finally showed your power, but, his dino fangs bared. You're still a big disappointment. I wanted to see Germa's suit, damn it. The Hollowell mind specialists also seemed peeved. Well, Zoro couldn't care less. I told you to stop adding fuel to the fire, Sanji yelled. Your tough guy act ain't foolin' me, Germa boy. You had to call your buddy for emotional support in the middle of a fight. That was so much more than emotional support, Usopp grumbled, eyes downcast. No matter how hard he tried not to dwell on it, it still bothered him. Bothered all of them. Seeking support is Sanji's newest strength. Regardless, Robin commented, still irrevocably proud of him for that. Her words sent a relaxing warmth through the crew, slightly easing the burden of the death pact. Sorry to eavesdrop, but you were talking to the pirate hunter, weren't you? That guy's never gonna beat King, by the way. TCH. Zoro scoffed. He'd proven him wrong, and he was glad Sanji ended up kicking his ass. Sanji stared, unimpressed and unperturbed. There was no doubt in his mind that Zoro wouldn't pull through. Didn't matter how tough the opponent was. If Queen was trying to get under his skin, he'd have to try a lot harder than that. It's funny how our enemies always think they can get us to doubt our friends, Robin said. Indeed, Brooke hummed. We have the utmost faith in each other, and they would retain that faith no matter what changes should occur in their cook. Of course, it wasn't like Queen's obnoxious yapping hadn't gotten to him already. His words rang in Sanji's ears now, with Judge's own cruel conviction trailing right behind. Don't pretend you're not excited to show off that Germa blood in your veins. Being human won't cut it. Not when monsters win wars, which is the reason I give this gift to my own progeny. Their enthusiasm held no weight in his mind. All he could picture was mass destruction. Catastrophic slaughters. Blood splattered across mass graves. All by the cold hands of Germa. His hands. The hands he'd always cherished above all else, everyone grimaced. Way to spoil the mood, ya know, by smashing your suit, Queen hissed. Can't he shut up about that? Zoro grumbled in his grumpy tone. The cook had enough problems. Guy can't read a room, Usopp agreed. I'm trying to have fun here. Sanji glowered. Yeah, you said that already. And I'll keep saying it until you're dead. I had one chance at this, and now I'm screwed because of your daddy issues. This made Sanji pause. Chance at what? So, you still don't get it? The Straw Hats were just as confused. You and your siblings are Judge's masterpiece, powerful living weapons. A true test of his talent as a scientist. So, what does that mean if I use my own cyborg body to kick your ass? It means I'm the best. It proves that I'm a greater genius than Judge. Oh, I see. He wanted to use Sanji as a test dummy, Brooke said. Number bones about it. Why does everyone think Sanji's just a sacrificial test subject? Nami said, angry on their cook's behalf. She was getting tired of this pattern, and Sanji didn't deserve it. Sanji wanted to groan. Why did this crap always have to fall back onto him? At least I get a consolation prize, Queen continued, lower. Before you die, I'll show you exactly what my science can do, Vinsmoke. Before Sanji could fire back a retort, Queen's eyes turned a glaring red, growing brighter and brighter until red lines of light shot forward. Sanji panicked, barrel rolling to dodge the onslaught. He shot beams from his eyes. These were different than any of his other lasers, and yet something about it was all too familiar. Wait a second, Ichiji flashed through his mind, red hair as bright as his signature eye-beams. Don't tell me, Queen snickered. Did he replicate their moves? Nami wondered. If he's such a genius, why's he gotta copy someone else's tech? Frankie said. Tishishishishi. Hollowell found it all amusing. Not only was he getting information on Vinsmoke, Judge and Germa, but also Queen, and the downfall of two of his rivals sent a thrill through him. Bet you know this one, too? Sanji's eyes widened as he was hit dead in the chest, cool blue lightning zapping him to the core. He screamed, collapsing to the floor. Niji's move? That was one he definitely didn't care to relive, he thought, shakily forcing himself back on his feet. You're catching on, Vinsmoke. The Dino Borg swung his claws, electricity shimmering as Sanji ducked, dodged, and deflected with fierce swipes of his legs. The walls splintered around them with each cyan current. As you can tell, Queen huffed, as if physically unable to brag, I've done thorough research on all of Germa's tech. I can replicate any move that your brothers do, except I make it look good. I don't care. Metal and hockey collided. Blade to shin. Point to heel, again and again. The idea was to show it to you after you transformed, but you really screwed that up for me. Yeah, screwing things up was Sanji's specialty. Who the hell cared? Usopp peered down at his tally marks. Was that self-deprecating or? That one seemed to be a mix, Brooke said. Like, He still believes he messes everything up, Nami said with a sigh, but he's not letting it get to him anymore. Kicking your ass is one thing. Queen's fist came down hard. The floor shattered, and Sanji was knocked back. With a back handspring he moved out of the way and slid on his heels before immediately pushing himself forward again without a break in momentum. But I can't really stick it to Judge unless I beat your ass in the suit. That would have proven my superiority without a shadow of a doubt. I don't care about your dumb rivalry. Was this guy hard of hearing or just that self-absorbed? How many times did Sanji have to say it? The cook hurled through the air in a twirl of moves. He was suddenly snatched by metal claws, even being nowhere in his previous range. Queen threw Sanji against the wall without LM having stretched out in metal tendrils, and his torso began to spin, dragging Sanji, face first, along for the ride before slamming him down just to yank him back up again. Yanji's Chopper remembered, the others nodding. Ooh-ha-ha. I nailed it, right? Queen laughed. You've probably been on the receiving end of that one before. Sanji moaned through his whiplash. It was damn cruel that they weren't even here and he couldn't escape his brother's attacks. Yeah, Luffy picked his nose. Sanji has the worst luck across all 4 seas. Nami sighed. When even Luffy can see that, you know it's true. He just keeps getting punished for things his family's done, Usopp said. Chopper's eyes watered. It's not fair. You're supposed to be the culmination of Judge's technological research. So, why you gotta be such a sad sack about the whole thing? Queen waited for a response from the man in his grip, but Sanji only moaned again. The dinosaur scowled. Without the suit you're not even worth playing with. Alright, I'm done. I'm gonna smash you to pieces and send you straight to hell. It's not over until I say it is, came Sanji's voice as an orange glow erupted around them. Queen's claws shattered apart as Sanji's leg whipped upward. The explosion ricocheted off Queen's metal body and sent Sanji rolling down the hall with grunts of pain. Arg! My beautiful arm, Queen was yelling as he flailed, catching his balance and mourning the damage at the same time. Sanji panted from the floorboards, eyeing the enemy. His hand trembled, and Sanji relished that fact. He'd been too still before. Too robotic. But struggling, that was fine. Meant he was still more human than experiment. Queen was back to shouting his nonsense, and Sanji had had enough. He swiveled his head over his shoulder to glare at him. Hair disheveled with battle. Face serious and bruised and unrelenting. Whatever Queen saw in his gaze made the man balk and lean back. Good. The Straw Hats saw it, too. Even the mind specialists. There was an intensity in the blue of his eyes that promised the brutal chill of death. Let me make one thing clear, suit or no suit, you're going down. I've got everything I need right here. Sanji's leg lit up the room, and he was instantly moving. A swirl of reds and yellows and oranges. Too fast for the cyborg. The kick landed directly against his stomach, sending him tumbling. Sanji landed lithely. Waited. Watched his opponent hobble back over to him like he hadn't already been sent flying due to Sanji's power once before. Sanji would do it again. And again. He would do it as many times as it took to knock him out and shut him the hell up. A sentiment the Straw Hat swordsman appreciated. You're full of crap, Queen growled after Sanji had voiced his thoughts. All this coming from the guy who ran away calling for a timeout. That's the chump I'm supposed to be afraid of. I don't give a damn what you have to say. Like it or not, I've already accepted my fate. He imagined a blood-stained dungeon floor and an iron helmet. Then, he shot his eyes open, clearing the image away. I'm not the same guy you fought before. Yeah? Queen scoffed. Because from my perspective, you've got it backwards. You could have changed, but you refused to embrace your cyborg powers. I thought Judge's masterpiece might have given me a challenge, but it looks like his tech, and children, are nothing but failures. Zoro's eye narrowed. He really hated that goddamn word. Basing the entire family off Sanji, and therefore deeming them all as failures. Brook trailed off with a shake of his bony head. A low blow for Sanji. And completely not true, Chopper huffed. Surprisingly, only the crew seemed to be the ones offended on their cook's behalf. Sanji had let it roll right off him, his conviction truly solid. Say what you want, Sanji said. Even though I destroyed the raid suit, it might have been too late. Maybe one day I will be a cold-blooded monster without even realizing it. In his mind's eye, he saw himself on a battlefield of black and white. Only the stains of the bodies glowed red. Red to match his burgundy suit. He stood alone among them, the monster. The Straw Hats were frowning, wanting to protest. But running from that truth won't make it go away. I refuse to die like a dog, scared of my own shadow. Sanji's foot went ablaze again, this time curling around his entire body like the manifested spirit of his resolve. Right now, all that matters is kicking your ass. Cut the crap, Vinsmoke, don't you know my science is the best, the strongest? Why, compared to you, an inferior weakling, I'm invincible. With that, Queen's laughter echoed out of existence as his body disappeared. Chopper gasped. That move is Sanji's. Sanji cursed. Of course, Stealth Black. If you're not gonna use it, then I will, Queen cackled maniacally. If Queen wanted to play hide and seek, then two could play that game. Sanji vanished, as well. It would be harder for Sanji, who had to keep constantly moving in order not to be seen, but it was doable. Sanji is also more susceptible to running out of stamina, Robin murmured. Queen would simply need to lay low until then. Dude's the size of a ship, though, Frankie countered. Sanji's just got to hit the right spot. And the cook has loads of stamina, Zoro added, before balking at the pursed silence that arose with knowing, teasing faces. Not like that. The others snickered as he muttered under his breath, bunch of perverts. Like a silent ghost, Sanji Air walked from side to side, attempting to sense or hit a solid object. As big as a house as he was, though, Sanji still couldn't find him. Surely it was only a matter of time. Suddenly, tiny squeaks captured Sanji's attention. A mouse scurried out from the rubble. Chuji, came a familiar voice. It's her. The geisha. What is she doing? Nami started, then abruptly stopped. She realized the hallway must seem empty to her. Just like it seemed to Sanji when. Sanji flipped backward, clinging to a shadowed corner like a spider, out of sight of wandering eyes as he carefully tracked the woman. Bandaged yet beautiful, the pink geisha knelt as the tiny creature he had called Chuji ran into her open palms. A pet? Let's go, she kindly said. We have to hurry to a safe spot before those two start fighting again. She didn't realize she wasn't alone. For all intents and purposes, the hall looked empty. She could get hurt. Queen wouldn't care about a civilian. Queen could. Sanji's pupils withered. His eyes widened. It was Queen, Nami shouted, sure now that Sanji was having the exact same realization as she was a second ago. It would make sense, Robin said, as the others also started catching on. This woman was hit in front of him, but Sanji didn't remember doing it. He'd been distracted through most of this fight, and yet that was the only thing he had no recollection of. And then Queen had appeared seemingly out of thin air. That's right, Usopp said, remembering now, too. Conveniently after Sanji was blamed for the whole thing. And Curly's right. There was no way that was the only gap in his memory no matter how deep he was in his thoughts. I knew it could never be Sanji, Chopper cried, hugging Luffy who laughed. He'd never ever hurt a lady. Sanji had been afraid Germa's power would take away everything he believed in. His humanity was what had gotten him here today. His code of honor was his strength and his pride. Hitting an innocent woman was always wrong. That should have been his first thought. But he'd been so afraid of losing himself that he got wrapped up in a maze of his own guilt. However, now, there was no doubt. It was all too clear what had happened. He'd been set up on the fly, Queen being the true fiend. The realization made Sanji's blood boil. His eyes narrowed, zeroing in around the perimeter of the girl, because his opponent wasn't only against striking a lady, but doing so unprovoked as well. Just as he suspected, something moved. Shaw. The floorboards splintered with seemingly no weight. Sanji took off, his legs moving almost as fast as his thoughts. All this time, he'd been constantly at war with who he was designed to be and who he wanted to be. The two versions of himself that were polar opposites. If he was created to be some type of cyborg, and those genes had activated inside him, who said he had to lose the part of himself that mattered most? Queen was a cyborg who acted on his own volition. And on the opposite spectrum of honor, so was Frankie. Hell yeah, brother, Chopper laughed. That's true, isn't it? Fighting against the physical changes of his body would be pointless. As long as Sanji remained control of his mind, he would be fine, and so far nothing has led him to believe that wasn't the case. He hadn't hit that woman. He might turn into a cyborg, but he was still Sanji. He was tired of fighting himself. He had far too many enemies, far too many obstacles to spend so much energy wrestling himself into submission one way or the other. He could be both. He would be both. The Straw Hat eased his stance as he sailed through the air, heel curving into place naturally, every muscle unwinding in a ripple of peace. Think about what you've gained. An exoskeleton and mobility. More tools in my arsenal. That's all. As he categorized his thoughts into their appropriate places, Sanji's entire body molded like magma. If I fine-tune my armament hockey, with one leg alight, Sanji spun and cover my exoskeleton with it. Zoro and Luffy and the guys all leaned in, intrigued by this line of thought. My legs will become stronger than ever. As Sanji spun, his flames turned violet. Whoa, Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper muttered, eyes turning to stars. They'll be capable of supporting even hotter flames than before. He stilled, and the violet flames spread into a scorching blue, sparking with white-hot light. This, faster acceleration, heavier weight, is Ifrit Jamba. Whoa! The star eyes doubled in size, Frankie and Brook joining in. Sanji's power grew. He didn't have any more doubt. As a blue-hot kick sent an invisible force flying, Queen tumbled into existence once again. Where did Master Queen come from? The woman cried, startled. Sanji landed in front of her, arm outstretched. Don't worry, leave him to me. He hopped forward and scooped up the little mouse that had also went tumbling at Sanji's impact, keeping it shielded from harm. It's like the little mouse friend he had back in Germa when he was younger, Luffy noticed. And this time he gets to protect it, Robin added, making Frankie bawl. It all comes full circle. The cyborg wept. Queen's scaly fist rocketed forward, and the two men were instantly back in action with a vengeance. Sanji jumped into the air and dodged. Swipe after swipe, Sanji rolled, cartwheeled, and spun out of harm's way with ease. His speed had accelerated. His mobility was unmatched. He surfed along Queen's tail to the monster's back, too quick for the man to deflect or even react. One by one, Sanji called out his moves, leg mightier than ever, his North Blue dialect spitting from his lips. His movements were just as smooth as his accent. Blood jutted from Queen's mouth, and finally, with one final blow, Sanji kicked him sailing back. His crew watched on in awe and admiration and pride. The scene panned from one blazing blue foot to the other, riding up one leg to the second which stretched straight up into the air as the wine-red suit hugged every muscled curve of his body. Zoro swallowed heavily. That fucking suit. The cook needed another one. Identical. Zoro might have accidentally ripped apart that one. Sanji held his stance, breathing hard. The leg in the air swung down at the knee, sending down a rain of cyan sparks, and hung in front of him with a graceful poise only Sanji could master. Woohoo! Queen puffed, covered in blood and filled with adrenaline. Now that is Vinsmoke power if I've ever seen it. Nah, that was all Sanji, Luffy grinned. You know, Sanji may have never beaten his brothers, Nami said. But he proved he could by beating Queen's copies of their Germa abilities. This made Zoro smirk. But you're still trying to deny the truth, Germa boy. And Zoro's smirk was wiped clean. You're the one in denial, Sanji growled. I'm my own man. Is that so? Queen's eyes glowed red. Your future is crystal clear to me. I know exactly how that new power of yours is going to evolve. How your body will evolve. Usopp and Chopper gulped. His dark laughter turned into a ringing in Sanji's ears. You say you left your family behind, but no matter how much you deny your power, you're still Judge's son. As you know, you're a worthless failure. You're a blemish on the Vinsmoke name. Having you as a son is my greatest shame. Sanji saw himself at the dregs of Germa Kingdom, drowning in a downpour with a familiar iron mask around his head, as Queen's onslaught of words continued. You were born a cyborg, and you'll die as one. Across from the shivering Sanji in the iron helmet, stood current Sanji, fists clenched and eyes blazing. The Straw Hats' stomachs churned. After everything they'd seen, the sight, imagination or not, of their present-day Sanji back in that iron mask was haunting. It was like a part of his soul had never been freed from it, even after all this time. I don't care, Sanji said, staring at himself. At a version of himself that always clung to him. It doesn't matter how I was born. This is my life and my future to decide, and I'll carve it out with my own 2 feet. As if talking directly to his alternate persona now, the Vinsmoke of the Sanjis, his voice hardened. I know who I am. Your words don't hold any power over me anymore. Those words in his head that were a solemn echo of Judge and his brothers. The words that made him falter. Made him second-guess himself over and over and over. Made him fear his own humanity. But not anymore. I'm a first-rate chef of the sea, Sanji declared, head held high. No matter how much my body mutates, my heart won't waver. Luffy was beaming. Zoro's heart was too full to even know what to do with himself. The others were crying. Because not only was their friend exuding unwavering tenacity it had taken him his whole life to muster. His eyebrows were still facing the wrong direction through all of it. He was still himself, despite his mutations, just like he said. The iron helmet in his mind crystallized, and shattered. Judge's face, and everything he stood for, followed suit, nothing more than broken ideals blowing far away from Sanji, as the blonde now stood at the edge of the sea, setting sun shining in soft pinks and oranges. Zeph walked up to him, eyes kind. Knowing. He looked out at the sea first, and Sanji followed his gaze. A diverse group of friendly faces stood at the shore, waiting for him to join them on the sunniest ship to ever set sail. But I'm more than a chef. Sanji's smile was blinding and kind and in love with his crew. I'm Black Leg Sanji or the Straw Hat Pirates. That's right you are, Brook cried, while Chopper wailed, we love you, Sanji. Usopp and Frankie clung to each other in their tears, the sniper weeping. I need to hug him so bad. Nami chuckled, wiping at her own wet cheeks. Oh, shut up, Queen bellowed. You're a failed cyborg, and a failed human. I won't lose to a second-rate science project. Time to shut this guy up for good, curly brows. Zoro's voice was softer than usual, but he didn't care. Sanji had the same thought. He ran, sliding between every colorful laser beam that glistened in his direction and blasted around him. He jumped, his heel smashing down on Queen's cranium in a vibrant display. The impact sent a wave of air and destruction billowing, and the memory began to flicker like static. It didn't matter to Sanji what Queen or anybody else said, because just remember, our mother selflessly gave her life to protect you and your humanity his opponent, only to gain stronger momentum and push forward again. The air tremored around him like it was being electrocuted, sending the colors waving. The memories sputtered more than once, as if skipping beats and rewinding. What is this? Hollowell questioned, and the Straw Hats realized the static of the memories must not be normal. The specialists were fidgeting, eyes scanning screens in a frenzy. I need you on my crew, Sanji, for Luffy, for Zoro, for Zeph, for his mother and for Reiju. For all the friends he's met along the way to the All Blue, and for Sanji himself. He would never lose his humanity. Cyborg or not, he was never a Vinsmoke, and he never would be. His fiery blue foot sank into Queen's side as Sanji jammed into him with a warrior's cry. His thoughts were a constant barrage of faith in himself. That he wasn't just a cyborg built by cruel hands, that he wasn't a Vinsmoke. Because he wasn't. Queen's dying scream ricocheted in a flash of blinding light that sizzled into frantic pants. I am not Vinsmoke, Sanji was saying, but it was different, more afraid, yet somehow firmer. I am not a Vinsmoke. The sounds of Onigashima were drowned out by these echoing thoughts, these chants of a Sanji that. Sanji, Chopper wailed, pointing, making everyone's eyes fly down to where the cook was trying to suck in oxygen as the machine around him spewed smoke. I am not a Vinsmoke. I am not a Vinsmoke. He's hyperventilating, Robin realized. The memories have finally become too much for him. Zoro's whole world stilled. Leave me alone, I am not a Vinsmoke. I am Sanji. I am not a Vinsmoke. With a shattering crunch, the Hollowell memosphere erupted from Sanji's head into a billowing haze of pieces, and the screen of memories sputtered out into black silence. As the memosphere burst into pieces, the titanium ball of blue light that contained the physical manifestation of Hollowell's devil fruit powers to recall and store memories, shattered into a sparkling mist among the glass. The restraints around Sanji's body malfunctioned in the voltaic chaos. The blonde fell to his knees, onto his forearms. Then, panting, covered in layers of sweat and tears, collapsed onto his stomach, the neural headpiece bouncing off his head, finally. Sanji, Luffy, Nami, and Chopper yelled. He actually broke it, Usopp murmured, shocked. Relieved? Nervous, once he caught sight of the expressions that had crossed the Hollowell team's faces. There was a threatening silence from the frozen specialists as they watched the smoke clear into vents they had activated. Whatever form of awake Sanji had been throughout the extraction of his memories, he was completely unconscious now, cheek plastered to the linoleum, hair fanned out over both eyes. His shirt clung to his back, slick with sweat. It was a miracle he hadn't been wearing one of his suits, otherwise he might have overheated. Chopper telling them all as much in a high voice strained with worry. Sanji's breathing gradually returned to normal, but there was no consolation to the Straw Hats as his system surely took a straining toll after being in fight or flight mode for so long. The crew could only hope that he was in a dreamless sleep, if not entirely restful. Eventually, Hollowell himself was the first to move. With a disgruntled click of his tongue, the man walked over to Sanji's prone form, swiping scraps of machine away with his foot to clear a path. "What a hindrance, this one," Hollowell said, tone uncharacteristically dark. "First he crushes the only Germa technology that made him of any use, and now he destroys my memosphere. We also lost all the memories we obtained from him," Reese added, tapping at her tablet. "Every single one." Something akin to satisfaction registered in Zoro's mind. The cook might have gone through hell, but these assholes hadn't gotten shit out of it like they wanted. Although, he supposed they had witnessed enough. As if sensing the relieved tension from the remainder of his captives, Hollowell glanced over his shoulder at the cells, meeting each varied face with icy eyes. His sinister smirk was back. "No matter," he chirped. "We still have various recordings saved, I'm sure. Plus, the sad sap isn't going anywhere anytime soon. We can always try again. Every single day. Tishishishishi." Zoro's blood boiled. Like hell, the snapping of Hollowell's wiry fingers interrupted the swordsman and various other pirate protests. "Clean this disaster up," he told his team. "Bring out a new bed for our troublesome guest. There are other ways to get what we seek while we repair the damage, and get the holo data up on my tablet. I need to arrange a meeting." "Zoro," Nami whispered while the specialists flurried about in earnest, lost in their new tasks, "your aura." With its wielder's spike in hockey, Enma was seething with bloodlust. The other Straw Hats were drawn to their glowing swordsman, too. "Listen," Nami whisper yelled with the moss head was already drawing 2 swords and definitely not listening. Zoro took a single glance at her, which was enough. "I noticed it before, when you were reacting to Pudding's betrayal," Nami said. "Your hockey is nullifying that Invir guy's weird electricity in the glass. Look at the door." Sure enough, wherever the purple glow brushed against the glass, a hole appeared, vanishing as quickly as the flow of hockey pulsed. "Zoro's hockey, aligned with Enma, is bypassing Invir's voltage," Robin murmured in intrigue. Meaning it had to be a devil fruit power of his, Zoro realized, no matter what kind of technology these assholes used to magnify it. Zoro glanced at the specialists. Ashvin and Hollowell were circling Sanji like vultures. The quiet one with the dark red hair, Loic, fiddled with the broken memo sphere, a deep frown etching his face, while the woman stretched in her chair, tapping at her tablet with a tired yawn. Lastly, Invir, with his robotic arm that seemed to manipulate whatever their cells were made of, collected the damaged neural headpiece. None were paying attention to the Straw Hats. Most even had their backs toward them. If Zoro could get through the door, he could slice through them all in one go. They made a convenient beeline straight for the cook. "Hey, I know you're about to do something reckless, but you can't underestimate them," Nami warned. "They not only have devil fruit powers, but they can utilize them in unknown ways thanks to their technology. Do not try to take them all on yourself when there are alternatives." By her explanation, taking out Invir would release their containment holds, but not the sea prism stone restraints still locked on the others. Nami would need time to undo those. They wouldn't be able to help fight until then. However, getting rid of Invir still might be their best bet. With him gone, so is his power. As soon as the current in the cell walls has subsided, I can cause a distraction so you can get Sanji to safety. Get out of here, go find Jimbei, and then come back for us if we haven't already escaped ourselves. And for the love of the ocean, don't get lost, okay? Usopp added. Zoro pretended to ignore the sniper's remark as he cursed the clever witch and her logic. He wanted to take out all of them himself. They were all involved in the cook's torture. Not to mention Ashman really pissed him off. Still, the swordsman could appreciate a solid plan in which he still got to cut someone. Once Nami freed the others, it would be an easy escape for them, no doubt about that. And then he and Luffy could come back and kill the rest of him. Blow this hellhole up for good measure. Zoro's knuckles whitened around the hilts of Kitetsu and Enma as his eye zeroed in on Invyr. The heavy man had approached Sanji, talking to Hollowell about infusing his power into the neural headpiece as a layer of protection for future extractions. In case of more meddlesome mutants, he claimed, nudging Sanji's head with his steel-toed boot. Zoro ripped through the containment door like it was made of paper. Invyr felt the moment it happened. He was the first to turn. Unfortunately for him, the new angle opened his weakest points for attack, and Enma was embedded through his flesh before so much as a warning could be cried. The dark blade swept diagonal from stomach to shoulder blade, detaching the cybernetic arm from his body, which was obliterated within the next second by Kitetsu. Loic retaliated from the right before Zoro could grab for the cook. With a blade through his ribcage, Loic only stumbled out of its range in time to spare him any fatal damage. Ashman was suddenly on Zoro's left. The swordsman hadn't detected any attack. Shit, his lips were too close to Zoro's ear, and his own memory played through his mind. With my call fruit it becomes impossible to turn down my suggestions, Ashman said, after whispering something into the cook's ear. With another curse, Zoro ducked off to the side in a hurry. A slim hand took advantage of his momentary lapse of balance and wrapped around his ankle, firm in its grasp. Zoro looked down in time to see a wave of teal hair before his body was collapsing. What the hell? He gritted his teeth as he tried, and failed, to push himself up. Was his body filled with lead or something? Reese hadn't even moved much. Now, she leaned over her tablet-littered desk with her chin now resting in her hand, peering tiredly down at the murderous swordsman. You'll be asleep soon, she warned. What? But as if in tune with the woman's words, Zoro's body grew heavier and heavier, almost like he was plagued with an insurmountable fatigue. Ashman, face twisted cruelly, kicked Zoro's swords away. They clattered into a corner. Zoro was grabbed by the scruff of his hair like a dog and dragged back to the cells. Nami hadn't NGLE foot out when Invyr's buzzing currents gave way. Hollowell had shoved her back during the chaos. Along with a still restrained Luffy and Frankie, who were worming their way out of their own cells to do who knows what, and enacted a failsafe device. They were now caged in by bulletproof glass. But this, at least, Nami knew she could get them out of. Knew we should have sedated you with Reese dose fruit from the start. Ashman was grumbling at the limp swordsman in his grasp. Now we have all this extra mess to clean. Tishishishi. As expected from the demon of the East Blue, surely. Hollowell pinched the handlebars of his mustache, curling the ends as if fixing a matted appearance from the sudden running around. However, you lot can wait in the containment sector now. You've worn out your amusement here. Containment sector? Usopp gulped. What about Sanji? Chopper asked vehemently. If they were at least all together, then. Oh, we won't be through with him for a while, as accurate as Vinsmoke Judge was about this son of his. I do wonder, what would he think now that his failed experiment has awakened his mutations? Someone should contact him. Let him know. Tishishishishi. The Straw Hats froze. He wouldn't. Zoro glared through his sleepy haze. Ashman felt his futile attempt at struggle. A shaky knee and a pitiful grunt. And the man gripped his green hair tighter just out of spite. Hollowell had nothing more to say. The other specialists were gone, tending to the cleanup or their own wounds. And the Straw Hats could only glower at the purple-clad man dragging their swordsman along with a taunting sneer. One thing is clear. Vinsmoke Sanji was born a weapon that has finally awakened, albeit pitifully, his potential. When the day comes that you, Roronoa Zoro, must live up to your oath, I will be there waiting with a front row seat. Zoro hissed as he was tossed back behind glass. Ashvin pressed something along the wall, and all 3 cells began to lower, each slowly clicking below ground one by one, click, click, until Zoro and Nami's was the last remaining, the sliver of laboratory thinning to blackness, with only Ashvin to bid them farewell. Ashvin never took his eyes off the green swordsman. "But don't worry about your cook," he mocked. "If he gets lonely during the wait, I have a bed he can keep warm." "You, son of a bitch," click. Ooh, the darkness hurt. Somehow, Sanji felt that that shouldn't be right. That the darkness was what saved him from something. Something worse than the darkness itself. But right now, all he could process was that it hurt. All sense of time was lost in the painful void, and Sanji, he was sick of it, so sick of it. He needed to get out of here. With a shiver that radiated through every bone in his body, Sanji awoke with a startled gasp. No, the brightness hurts, too. It took him a moment for his eyes to adjust to the whiteness of the room. The sterile blues and liquid silvers. The blaring fluorescence above him. His head was killing him, eyes stinging like he had cried for hours, and the air was as comforting against his hot skin as it was too cold. What happened? His throat was rough with strain. Shishi, Sanji stilled. "Welcome back, Vinsmoke Sanji." "Arg, that's right." He looked around. Hollowell stood over him, clipboard tablet in hand, and 2 of his specialists standing on either side of him, Ashvin and Reese, both as apathetic with their expressions as ever, even if one was far lovelier with it. The last thing Sanji remembered was being strapped to a machine that had no business existing, with a helmet that they forced him to wear. But, even still restrained to a bed, none of the extra parts were here anymore. The lab was practically back to empty, to how he'd seen it when he woke up in his cell the first time, except… "Hey, where are my friends?" he demanded. How long had he been out? Was this even the same room? Where the cell blocks where there was nothing but a titanium wall now? "Friends? Oh, dear boy." Hollowell threw the cook a pitied look. "Your friends left you here?" Sanji's curly brows furrowed. "The hell are you talking about? My crew would never?" "That was before they saw everything in that head of yours," Hollowell responded easily. "Your memories, many of them feel like they just happened yesterday, do they not, Tishishi?" Hollowell knew the blonde's answer by his silence. "We all saw your memories, boy. You're quite the tragedy." Every muscle in Sanji's body buzzed like they were on high alert. "I merely wanted the collection for my own purposes, but your crew happened to be around to witness it all. Let me tell you, they weren't impressed, knowing the real you." You're lying, don't believe me? Check behind you." Hesitantly, Sanji craned his neck to see a display of giant screens. Hollowell was rewinding a recording. He stopped at a random destination. Then skipped ahead to another. Then another. And another. And all Sanji could see was himself. His body, his mind, his whole being. Every shadowed corner of ugly. Every hidden truth of fear. Sanji shook. What the hell is this? His siblings' fists. His mother's death. Zeph starving on that damn rock because of him. Judge's scorn. Pudding's mockery. And Hollowell was talking, and he was saying this was only a few snippets. A couple of moments. Like it wasn't all. Like it wasn't enough already. The disappointment, the ridicule, the anger, the hurt, the mutations. They saw all of that? They saw all his weaknesses, heard all his thoughts, analyzed all his actions, his entire crew? "Zoro, I will hand it to them," Hollowell was saying, laughing like this was all some joke at Sanji's expense and not Sanji's entire life being uprooted and thrown back in his face. "They were kind enough to give you the benefit of the doubt at first. Tishishi. But then you went and destroyed the one thing that made you of any value." Sanji had no idea what this guy was talking about. They wanted the raid suit, boy. Instead, what they saw was you selfishly choosing yourself over your own crew, time and again. No, they would never say those things. They even tried to see if your eyebrows were still facing the wrong way, Tishishi. Sanji's heart froze over. His throat was closing on him. "Face it, they can't trust you anymore, Vinsmoke. To them, you are nothing but a liability to their dreams." Sanji couldn't breathe. All he could hear was the sporadic ba dump of his heart in Hollowell rubbing every facet of terrifying realization in his face. Your captain finally realized you were a danger to his crew. Badump badump. Your swordsman didn't seem to like you proposing to someone else. Badumpy dump. Fuck. Fuck, you. You're a liar, don't play with me. Jackass. I told you that my crew would never, my friends are. Where are these friends? Hollowell stared, ice blue eyes eerie as they bore into Sanji's. Believe me or not, you are partly correct if you think they're still on the island, because they are, technically. You see, they promised they wouldn't interfere with our plans with you and your genetically enhanced if we let the rest of them leave. Of course, we never promised to let them get away unscathed. Tishishishishi. All of this because of him. Again. Could Sanji even blame them for leaving if they had? However, if you still insist on caring about the backstabbing pirates who abandoned you. He sneered the words like he knew Sanji would do exactly that. Then if you play nice, maybe we'll let them leave without any trouble at all. What do you say? Sanji tried to get his breathing back under control. He closed his eyes, willed his heart to still. He knew the answer, didn't he? Cooperate by luring Germa 66 to us, and we'll let your friends go. Yes, no matter what the crew thought of him now, no matter what Luffy was thinking, no matter if Zoro wanted Moss had previously realized, Sanji knew his answer. Vulnerability was a curse. But then, Sanji's whole life felt like a curse sometimes. Pain hammered against his skull. His forehead throbbed. The white room with the light blue glow of technology was too hot and too cold at the same time. Sanji's mind was as confused as it had been violated. Rummaged through like a sack, sliced open. Contents left to spill out like worthless gold when the starving pillagers had expected food. Now, Hollowell and his team were asking Sanji to invite Germa 66 right back into his life rather than him walking back into theirs. Like this was some sort of reoccurring theme he'd have to struggle with in itself. They were demanding, threatening, crap like this from him like the memories weren't bad enough to force out of him. Like splitting him open in front of his crew and revealing every humiliating nuance of his past hadn't taken it to the next level already. Sanji could barely contain the dire need for answers to his own questions. He wanted to know how much his crew saw. He wanted to know what they heard. He wanted to pry open their own thoughts, like a starved boy desperate to steal someone else's fair share of rations. But maybe he didn't want to see. Maybe there'd be nothing of substance, nothing that would possibly make any of this feel good. No matter what path he took, no matter what course of action he decided on, Sanji was always made a fool. He was turned into nothing more than a mockery. From people to goddamn fucking bounty posters, he was the continuous joke of the Grand Line. Maybe there was no escape from that. Hollowell watched Sanji swallow the lump in his throat. Reese tapped her fingers against her thighs. Waiting. Ashvin leaned his glare closer, and asked one more time on his superior's behalf. Vinsmoke Sanji, what do you say? Sanji closed his eyes. When he opened his mouth, all he could do was laugh. First a dark chuckle deep in the back of his throat, then louder, smiling almost sadistically beneath the shadow of his bangs. Had he gone insane? Possibly. As the laughter rumbled in his chest, vibrating every untethered emotion he knew he'd have to eventually face in the aftermath of it all, Sanji looked Hollowell dead in the eyes. Then across Reese, not lingering too long there. Then into the menacing orbs of Ashvin who had reiterated the request. What do I say, huh? Sanji finally responded, never breaking eye contact with the people treating him like he had a say, a voice, when they very clearly believed otherwise. Well, he did have a voice. He had an opinion, and no matter how much he dwelled on the nightmare he had woken up to, he kept looping back to the same answer. I say, that you people are pretty sure of yourself for being so full of shit. Hollowell threw his hand up to stop Ashvin from advancing, his amusement from earlier now non-existent. The scientist watched Sanji carefully, and the blonde leaned his head back with a final, tired chuckle. You don't get it, Sanji told them. You saw my memories, and you still don't see, do you? And you claim to be geniuses. Don't make me laugh. It doesn't matter that I made certain choices or thought certain things. It doesn't matter what I have or haven't done right. The Straw Hats would never leave me. They're my friends. My captain, my crew, and my partner for fuck's sake. My Nakama, you can spout all the bullshit you want, but even if they didn't want me, they would never abandon me. So, I don't care what you have to say, I'll never help you. You can threaten Luffy and the crew all you want, because I know you won't win against them." The resounding silence was slick with tension. All that could be heard was Sanji breathing through his teeth, pretending the outburst hadn't cost him the little energy he had. "Is that so?" Hollowell murmured, sounding less than impressed. "Is that really the hill you are willing to let your nakama die on?" Sanji swallowed, thick and heavy and exhausted. He'd fight them all damn day if that was what they wanted to do. He wouldn't back down, couldn't, refused. He'd been through this confliction before, and he couldn't risk letting the doubt gnaw at him. His friends wouldn't want that. If anything had changed in their thoughts, he hoped that hadn't. Preparing for a rebuttal, the group was interrupted by a green light buzzing at the other end of the room. With a beep and a whoosh, the wall slid open like a pair of automatic doors and a scrawny man in a white lab coat that Sanji hadn't seen before walked in. He made his way to Hollowell with a bowed head, half his chestnut face hidden beneath the purple scarf wrapped around his neck. His gold glasses encased timid eyes. His steps were small and quick. Nervous. A finger crooked the edge of his scarf away from his lips as he apologized to Hollowell for interrupting and whispered something urgently to him. Whatever information was being relayed made Hollowell's shoulders stiffen. He waved a disgruntled hand toward Sanji. "Reese, take care of him for a moment." Sanji watched as Ashvin was beckoned closer to Hollowell and the newcomer as they took a step away from him. Gah! Sanji's heart nearly drove itself out of his chest as Reese was suddenly in his space. "Are you that naive?" she insisted, noses almost touching with certain deliberateness. Sanji swiveled his head from left to right as Reese tried to grab his attention again and again. "Look at me," she demanded. But he would not. Such a delicate, beautiful voice belongs to nobody. He was muttering at top speed while commanding his eyes, flickering in and out of heart shapes, to land anywhere but on the woman meant to entice him. Nobody exists with a perfume of such sweet, aquatic springtime hyacinths. Nobody at all, haha. A bead of sweat dropped down the back of Reese's head. She knew the man to be a hopeless basket case. She hadn't expected him to resist. Ashvin was sent away with the newcomer, and Hollowell made his way back to Sanji, much to the blonde's relief. It was easier to deal with that prick than the teal-haired goddess. Of course, his relief was short-lived upon seeing the conspiratorial grin plastered to the man's face. "Tishishishi. You poor, delusional boy. There are other ways to persuade your cooperation. As it turns out, your grievously horrendous luck once again bats in our favor. Tishishi. Should you truly not care about your so-called friends anymore, we're about to find out." Sanji glowered. "Tisk. Don't put words into my mouth, jackass. I said I believed in them, not that I didn't care about them. Will they see it the same, I wonder? How many times do I have to say it?" Sanji started, before the doors swished open again and his words caught harshly against the back of his throat, his eyes widening. Ashvin and the other specialist returned, both hauling restrained captives. "As you can see," Hollowell chittered, "my specialists have detained these three in your crew's attempt to escape." Frankie was shoved onto his metal knees by both specialists, while Nami more obediently followed suit. Ashvin tossed Zoro's body unceremoniously onto the floor beside them. The green swordsman didn't move. "That one's still sedated," Ashvin informed them. Sanji's pupils withered. When had, they might have been able to get a little farther with the other Straw Hats if not for him. He played a big game for someone still out cold from Reese Devil Fruit. Sanji, the blonde started at his name, meeting the quivering brown eyes of the one who had said it. Nami's soft stare had him reeling. She'd never looked at him like that before. Looked at him like she'd never been happier to see him. More so than Whole Cake Island. And that realization manifested more concern than relief from the cook. Was she truly still happy to see me? Sanji blinked back, a sudden stinging in his eyes. Or was it pity? Any modi of relief turned to ash in his stomach. Ashvin stepped between them. "It seems the clever cat burglar went ahead and picked apart all their locks before we could re-secure their CD-owned swordsman. Must have been a hindrance. These two couldn't get out fast enough before our team had them surrounded. Told the others to leave them and, like pirates, they did." The spectacled man scoffed, ignoring the responding scowls from the two conscious captives. Frankie scoffed right back at him, though, before turning to Sanji. "Glad to see you awake, bro, although, it sure looks like you could use some more rest." The cyborg was smiling at him as gentle as Nami. Softer than usual. And oh god no, did they think him weak? Okay, so he already assured himself they wouldn't hate him no matter what they heard, that they'd still care about him because that was just who they were. But did they see him in a completely different light now? Of course they did. Why wouldn't they? Did they intend to coddle him from here on out? Make him feel he didn't need to live up to anything so he wouldn't? He didn't know, fail or something? He did a lot of that, and they probably saw it all, so it only made sense that they'd walk on eggshells around him. Face it, they can't trust you anymore, Vinsmoke. To them, you are nothing but a liability to their dreams. Hollowell had been right, hadn't he? So, would they feel obligated to keep him on board until they could arrange for him to safely travel on his own, either back to the Barati or… Nami disrupted his musings and dragged his attention back to her. Hey, Sanji, she called, voice sweeter than honey. Do me a favor? Sanji blinked at her. Swallowed. Forced a smile. Anything for you, Nami sweet. Whatever you're thinking, she winked, stop it. Huh? Sanji felt his face heat up as Frankie let out a throaty chuckle. Could they still read his thoughts? No, that was impossible, and not how that worked. He knew that much. But still, T-shi-shi-shi-shi. How awfully demeaning it must be. Hollowell waited until he knew he had Sanji's attention before clarifying. Having your crew know the ins and outs of your own mind. T-shi-shi. Sanji tried not to think about how much his body was burning up from embarrassment. They would surely manipulate you, Hollowell continued, and this time Nami spat at him. Like hell we would ever do that. Wait, a dreaded realization spread across her face. How long have you been awake, Sanji? What have they been saying to you? Well, go ahead, Sanji, Hollowell tittered. T-shi-shi-shi. Tell them how you plan to help us lure Germa 66 here in exchange for their safety. Frankie and Nami's eyebrows shot up, and Sanji could have sworn he saw Zoro's body twitch. I never agreed to anything, Sanji growled, low and exhausted. I don't think they believe you, Reese yawned, making Hollowell laugh again. T-shi-shi-shi. What did I tell you? They don't trust you anymore. Nami's mouth fell open, and Frankie's brows furrowed as he bellowed. Super untrue, man. Even if it sounds like something Sanji would do, he wouldn't lie about it. Sanji didn't want to think how much deeper they knew him now, or what motivations had changed for them in relation to him, so he just sighed over his erratic heartbeat. I refused their offer, he promised them. I knew you guys would escape. His two crew members seemed to relax a bit, something unknown in the depths of their stares that Sanji couldn't decipher. Maybe didn't want to decipher, until Ashman kicked Zoro's limp leg, hard. We can see how successful that turned out, the man noted, still glaring down at the prone body he felt the need to assault. Dark eyes locked on Sanji's equally darkening blue ones. The guy's contempt for the swordsman was palpable, and Sanji didn't understand what the mosshead had done to incite it, but he didn't care for it. I'll only say this once more, Sanji said. Your threats are pointless, and so is your mockery. It's nothing compared to what I've dealt with before. If I pushed aside every other person who had something to say about me, what makes you think I won't do the same to you? What makes you think you're so damn special? We've witnessed greater people than you fall, Hollowell said. You will be the most fun to watch, however. T-shi-shi-shi. Ashman yanked Nami up by her arm and threw her forward, causing Sanji to strain against his shackles. Nami, you probably won't budge no matter how many times we hit the swordsman, Ashman said. A theory I'm more than willing to test whether it's needed or not. A new heat was igniting in Sanji, a rage of pure passionate protection. But what about your little navigator? Ashman placed a heavy foot atop Nami's head, stepping lightly, pressing the side of her face into the floor with enough pressure to at least be uncomfortable. The fury on Sanji's face only seemed to spur Ashman on. You talk big, Vinsmoke, but we all know how much weakness you possess. We've seen it. Screw you, Sanji growled, at the same time Nami whimpered. Don't listen to a moron like him, Sanji. Ashman increased the pressure of his heel. Nami grunted. Sanji cursed. Threats were one thing, but he couldn't stand seeing Nami being stepped on like a doormat. Hollowell was by Frankie. And this one is a specimen all on his own. T-shi-shi-shi. It will be no trouble at all bringing in another table and taking him apart piece by piece right before your eyes. Frankie shook his head. Whoa, man, not cool. Sanji's restraints still drained his haki. He couldn't fight back like this. And Mosshead was down for the count. He knew his crew, though. Knew Luffy and the others had to be causing more havoc somewhere. It was the only hope they had right now, if he could just spare them more time. He didn't want to see the looks of triumph on these assholes' faces, but Sanji could swallow his ego and give them what they wanted anyway, for the time being. You've made your point clear, Sanji said. I get it, alright? If I help you, you let them go unharmed. No, Nami's protest cut off when Ashman kicked the back of her head. Oi, bastard, Sanji cursed. I said to leave her alone, you got some nerve treating. Let me guess, treating a lady so disrespectfully, Ashman snorted, somehow still monotone and indifferent. Sanji grimaced. You see, Vinsmoke, every person in this room knows more about you than you'll ever realize. Sanji's heart was hammering again, rapping against his ribcage as sweat beaded down his temple. This was the crap he didn't want to think about right now. They kept bringing it up like they knew it. We can see you trying to deny it, Hollowell said with an amused tilt of his head. You have nothing that belongs solely to you anymore. Tishishi, how does that feel? Shut up. You wanted my help, and I'm willing to give it, so either bargain or don't, but I'm tired of your games. Ashman stepped toward him, slow and deliberate. You don't seem to understand your situation. I could simply suggest you cooperate, and you will have no choice but to listen. I guess you were out of it when I used it on you before. The man sighed in irritation. For Dr. Hollowell, breaking you is far more fun, despite how tiresome I find it. However, Ashman reached Sanji then, leaning far too close. Sanji could see his own disheveled, violet-tinted reflection in his glasses. There are enjoyable activities more to my liking that I could suggest to you instead, you know, to make up for it. Ashman's fingers were suddenly in Sanji's hair. Stroking. The cook flicked his head back, spitting at the man. Back off. It's a shame how much I could enjoy you if you didn't feel the need to talk, Ashman sneered. Funny. I might say the same about you, Sanji shot back, if there was anything about you to enjoy. This time when Ashman's hand wound through yellow hair, he yanked, hard. Sanji grunted as his chin angled upward from the force. Big words from someone with such a pathetic life history. Even a pretty face isn't worth much on you. Your swordsman sees that now, too, I bet. Sanji didn't say anything. No smart remark to that. Ashman almost grinned. Because it's something you should. What made you believe someone could love you like that when all you do is bring trouble to those closest to you? Oh, will you cry? It's a pity, how much of an absolute failure you are? Metal shot out of his neck, a blade piercing straight through his words. Sanji's eyes matched the shock of Ashman's as the man's glasses crashed to the floor. Blood dripped between them. They could barely register the screaming around them. In what felt like slow motion, a flash of green put itself firmly between the two, making Sanji's heart leap and drop in equal measures. Zoro. The moss-headed swordsman sported a devilish grin, and Sanji knew instantly that he hadn't been sedated the entire time he'd been here. Knowing the scientists had realized the same, Zoro's face glowed with satisfied vengeance as he bore his gaze into Ashman's, as sharp and deliberate as his sword had impaled his neck. I said I'd kill the next person who called him that. Zoro's harsh smirk grew deadlier. Real pity, how you didn't listen. Of course, you've had it coming since the moment you whispered that shit suggestion in his ears. The protruding hilt at the back of Ashman's neck was pulled toward Zoro in an arc. See you in hell, Zoro promised. Throat filling with a sickening gurgle, Ashman collapsed into two pieces among the puddles of his own blood. And then the room started to shake. Zoro stared at the body on the floor. That guy really pissed me off. The swordsman seemed untroubled that the room was rumbling like an upset stomach or that his blades had seemingly thrown the entire facility into chaos. Hollowell was shouting something. Frankie's arms had shot out like metal tentacles to restrain Reese from acting. The nameless specialist that had returned with Ashman and the others hadn't moved an inch, stark confusion evident on his face. Sanji, meanwhile, was still registering the fact that Ashman was dead, and that Zoro was here, well and fine and standing before him like a heroic mossball. Sanji didn't know whether to be grateful, relieved, or annoyed. Maybe he was all three, plus a secret fourth option. Nervous? Cautious? Anxious? Did Zoro think Sanji couldn't handle himself anymore? Would he no longer try to goad him with his shitty swordsman jabs? The shaking only increased in intensity with the sporadic bangs of explosions from beyond the laboratory's walls. Getting louder, closer. What the hell is? A furious hollowell was cut off by the thundering display of the wall behind him giving out. Through it came a boisterous cackle. Luffy's sword from the debris, his punching arm recoiling back to his body with a rubbery snap. Straw Hat, we came to kick your Tishishin ass, Holly. Sorry, Nami, came a calmer, deeper voice as Luffy landed on his feet. There was no containing him. Jimbei. Nami rubbed her temples, her restraints resting on the floor alongside Frankie's. They hadn't been locked, Sanji realized. Arg, whatever, Nami sighed. At least the two idiots broke the plan at the same time. The captain and first mate only cast unapologetic smiles, Luffy's growing even bigger when seeing that his favorite chef was awake. Sanji, you're awake. Sorry it took us so long. Nami was able to get all our restraints off, but that Loic guy had some stupid devil fruit. But then Jimbei showed up with a whole crew of Holly's specialists. Perhaps we should save the story for another time, Jimbei suggested, looking over his shoulder. From the hole Luffy had created came a cacophony of shouts and footsteps. A scuttle of people in lab coats carrying varying laser-like weapons, all cursing the Straw Hats, was fast approaching. Hollowell couldn't believe what he was seeing. So much destruction. So much disorder. How had all of this gone on under his nose? Even Ashvin hadn't noticed. Loic. Hollowell suddenly called into a snail calm as he backed away from a new wave of his loyalists charging in to protect him. Luffy was already barreling through them, Jimbei and Frankie right on his heels. Loic, answer me. He's the one who checked up on our cells, right? Zoro said casually, excitedly getting ready to join the fight. Yeah, he's been down for hours. The pure fear that withered Hollowell's eyes made Zoro chuckle, dark and deadly and satisfied. The feeling only grew when the scientist was yelling again. Reese, put them to sleep, now. The woman was already moving, but she didn't get very far. Two hands sprouted from the floor and bound her ankles. Actually, it's time you sleep, came Robin's smooth voice as Chopper shifted from running point to his normal form in one swift jump over the chaos, plunging a syringe into Reese's arm. Reese fell into a curled heap, already lightly snoring. Sagan. Sanji's eyes followed Hollowell's. The man had called his remaining specialist, the one still near a strangely unbothered Nami. Sagan started at Hollowell's cry, shaking off his disorientation. He dashed towards Sanji, who still struggled futilely against his bed of shackles. Tishishi, yes, Sagan. Hollowell almost laughed hysterically. Do something. Wait. What? Not that. Sagan wasn't aiming for Sanji at all. Zoro didn't even budge as the man ran past him. Hollowell screamed when Sagan's fingers crashed onto a keyboard and typed furiously. 6 clicks and then his thumb jammed into a button that started blinking green. The restraints around Sanji slid open with a miraculous swish. Sanji sat up, rubbing at his wrists. Everywhere that his body had been bound was rubbed raw. Nice one, Sagan. Nami cheered, before pulling at one of her bottom lids and sticking her tongue out at Hollowell. It was then that Sanji realized Sagan wasn't the only specialist to have defected. Nearly half from the hordes that had been chasing after the Straw Hats weren't fighting them, they were fighting with them. Things are finally getting fun, Zoro said as he readied his swords for the escalating battle. He'd missed most of the fighting being sorted into Nami and Frankie's group, even if he had snagged some of the main fighters. Zoro meant to make a quick appraisal of the still silent cook, but his gaze lingered, because the others weren't just making small talk when they said it was good to see him awake. Feeling a steady eye on him, Sanji glanced back at the swordsman, and instantly the blue there reflected a fountain of cascading emotions all tucked behind a wall Zoro wasn't meant to be able to see through like it was glass. They'd gotten good at reading each other throughout the years, more so once they were officially together. Somehow, they'd shared some unspoken willingness to slowly lay down their respective guards. Most of these moments that Zoro could only ever describe as soft and sappy were moments he'd come to appreciate more than he ever thought he would. He'd usually end up nuzzling into the cook like a house cat by the end of those conversations. Loath he was to admit it. But that was beside the point. Now, Sanji hadn't had a say in this new way Zoro could read him. In a way the others could read him, too. The cook would have to come to terms with it sooner or later. There was nothing any of them could do, after all. It would be a fine line to walk down, but it would be okay. Zoro would make sure it would be. Because he wasn't letting this dumbass chef that had stolen his heart think anything was changing between them. Or, if it was, it would only be for the better. Keeping eye contact with those growingly defensive blue eyes, Zoro smirked. Gonna sit on your ass all day, Curly? My head count's already 2 ahead of yours. Guess you could use the rest after all that napping, huh? Sanji's hackles rose. Shove it, moss brain, I'm just stretching. The blonde jumped to his feet, stretching hurriedly in different directions to prove his point. His stiff knee popped, echoing through the room. Sanji drooped, face in the floor, ass in the air, with a pained groan. A bead of sweat dropped down Zoro's brow. Maybe the cook had been immobile a little too long. Sanji pounded a fist into the floor and pushed himself back up, stomping as he glared at the stoic swordsman. That didn't count, he swore, pointing menacingly. How many times, through the bulk of Sanji's memories, had Zoro seen that same determined blaze in that exact scrunched-up face? How many times had he watched the cook get knocked down only to push himself back onto his feet with the exact same stubborn passion that was equally impressive as it was endearing? The fact that even now, even after being tortured to endure his hell memories all over again, even while worried about the invasive consequences of everyone knowing his secrets, he was the same cook he'd always been in the best possible ways, had Zoro throwing his head back with a single, startling laugh. Then he sighed. "Ah, I like you," Zoro responded, matter of fact, as Sanji stared wide-eyed at him, cheeks painted with a shocked blush. Idiot Mossy was acting like nothing happened just a second ago, and now he was throwing Sanji off with whatever the hell that was? "That bright red looks good on you, fancy brows. I'll kill you and present your head on your own sword." "Yeah? I'd like to see you try. If you two are done flirting, could one of you grab Hollowell?" "We're not flirting," both men shouted as they moved in unison to block the last exit route Hollowell had. A horde of Hollowell's specialists broke defense to try to intercept. Zoro spun to face them. The cook could take care of the crazy bastard just fine. However, Hollowell's destination was just short of where Sanji had ended up landing. While everyone had been distracted, the mad scientist had had other plans. His one final hope. He raced to a setup of levers, spindly fingers wrapping victoriously around one of them. "Tishishishi. You may think you and your pathetic crew have done something here, bin smoke, but one pull of this and it's all over." Hollowell's icy eyes shivered wildly. "Are you still talking?" Sanji asked, incredulous. "With this lever, I will. Joey shoot." Hollowell's smug face caved in mid-sentence, flames bursting from Sanji's heel against his skull. The madman went crashing through his equipment, all of it shattering in his wake until he landed in a heap of debris with a satisfying crunch. White hair singed black at the tips, and skin smoking, he laid still and unconscious and finally, without a single thought left to spew from his broken mouth. Adrenaline pumping, Sanji moved to make quick work of the remaining hordes near Nami, who didn't have her climatacked. Despite their advanced weapons and a few devil fruit users, it wasn't long before Hollowell's specialists thinned down enough where any remaining survivor started surrendering. The ones who had defected first erupted into cheers, along with Luffy and Chopper, who were always happy to be part of the happiness. Sanji took it all in with tired eyes, chest heaving. It was over. Jinbei walked past Sanji, patting him on the shoulder as he went. The blue fishman went to thank Sagan, the specialist who had helped free Sanji. "The thanks is all mine, Mr. Jinbei." The man pushed his gold glasses up with a blinding smile. "Without you, my friends and I would still be enslaved here. I am happy to have helped you find your crew and reunite you with your chef." "You sure you don't want our help taking care of things here?" Robin asked him. "The other specialists and I have the access to free the rest of this institute's guests. With the heavy contenders out of the way, we can destroy this place from the inside out, as well as take care of Hollowell and any other surviving specialists. Do not worry about us." Robin smiled. "Very well, we wish you all the best." "Likewise, Ms. Robin." Sanji figured he had missed a lot, But now he wondered just how much, still didn't know how long he'd been out of it. It felt like years. Years and years. His whole life, really. Taking a few quiet steps away from the crowd, he hovered close to the bodies of those who had put him through this. Who had strapped him to their memosphere and extracted everything personal to him. Made him relive it as if it had all happened yesterday. Maybe it had, in a way. Even though his Germa genes were healing his physical body at an accelerated rate, his head ached. His mind somehow felt sore. And it was their fault, not his, Hollowell and Ashman especially. At one point in time Sanji might have blamed himself for all the trouble his crew had to go through because of him, but not this time. Sanji hadn't asked for his biological roots. Sanji hadn't asked for these eyebrows to be so goddamn conspicuous. Sanji glared around him, at those who'd tortured him, forced his friends to watch, and maybe even hurt them, too. If there was one thing left to say to these assholes, it would be that they failed. Like I said, Sanji sneered, Sanji, oomph. Chopper clung to the cook's face, furry belly suffocating him. Sanji gently pried him off and held him at arm's length. Chopper, come on. I was about to end with a cool finishing line. Ha 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 ha. Luffy didn't doubt it as he, too, stretched and curled himself around Sanji, gangly legs encircling his waist, straw-hatted head resting on his shoulder. Oh, Chopper maneuvered to sit on Sanji's other shoulder. Okay, say the cool thing. Luffy laughed again. Yeah, no, I am not saying it now. Sanji's legs wobbled. Oh, he'd been restrained for so long his body wasn't acclimating well now that the adrenaline had simmered down. His head was swimming in fatigue and move, came the brusque demand of the mossy swordsman. Chopper and Luffy jumped off the cook as the blonde fell to his knees. He hadn't fallen completely, as he might have, had Luffy not still been holding onto him. Sanji. Chopper put a hoof to his forehead. Your body is still exhausted. Nami was suddenly there with the others. We can treat him properly when we're back on Sunny. Brook and Usopp are bringing her around, and Luffy's rampage made a clear route to the sea. Let's get the hell out of here. Are you able to walk, Sanji? Jinbei asked cautiously. The former warlord only knew snippets of the story so far, and none of it was good. He was wary of how calm their chef was acting. Clearly, his abused mind was at its limit for the moment, so maybe that was it. Before Sanji could assure that he was fine, that he'd get back to the ship no problem, Zoro was there. You can yell at me for this later, he said, swiftly picking the cook up and tossing him over his shoulder. Sanji, flustered and flailing, tried to protest. His curses started to slur even as his kick to the shitty swordsman's head was spot on. Zoro, of course, easily grabbed his shin before it hit him. The others were already running. Shut it, cook. Before I bandage you like a ham to prove a point. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, and Sanji knew what he meant. It wasn't like they had never helped each other before, never kept each other safe. In their own way they always were. And sometimes, on the rarest occasions, one chose to rely on the other without worry. Without guilt. Without scores that demanded settling. Like caring for each other's wounds even if they could have fended for themselves if needed. Like carrying an overgrown moss ball around Onigashima so he could get some sleep before the next big battle. And it was okay. And it would be okay. He was already drifting. The never-ending thrums of consequences banging to be remembered at the back of his head could be dealt with later. At least, in this moment, Sanji would let it be okay, with Nakama. Zoro maneuvered him into the cradle of his arms, and as soon as the warmth of his chest hit Sanji's face, the cook was out. Sanji had been up for a while. The Sunny's infirmary was dimly lit, and empty, quiet. Quiet, aside from the thoughts in Sanji's head that played the events of the last 24 hours on repeat. Of course, for all he knew, it might have been longer than a single day. It didn't feel like they'd been in captivity at Hollowell Mind Tech for very long, despite it being simultaneously the longest and fastest day of his life. He had been out for most of it, he figured, and he wanted to convince himself that he was still too tired from it all to deal with whatever was facing him outside these walls, but he was honestly wide awake even if his heart was filled with so much dread it anchored his body to the bed. He wanted to get back to his life with his crew, too. And that was probably the worst of it, because maybe he was more afraid of what that life would look like now. Worried it wouldn't be the same anymore. There was a familiar, light-hearted ruckus out on deck. Sanji surmised that the sun was setting and the portable fire pit was being set out. There was the distinct smell of a grill's smoke in the air. It only took a small section of Sanji's brain to be bothered by this before all of his nerves were on high alert. The crew hadn't bothered to wake him before dinner. Were they getting used to cooking meals without him until they found someone new to take over the kitchen? Fuck. Calm down. That's stupid, Sanji berated himself, rubbing at his eyes and forcing himself up. They'd had grill nights plenty of times before where Sanji was content to sit back and let an excited Frankie take over when he was in one of his grilling moods. It wasn't anything new. There wasn't any reason for Sanji to think tonight was a product of what they all now knew about him. Which was everything. Apparently, or at least enough to put Sanji so far on edge he was hanging by a thread. Hollowell's distinct laugh tethered to his thoughts by a ball and chain. Those bastard scientists might have been lying jackasses, but Sanji couldn't deny there were truths thrown into the mix. If Nami and Frankie could seemingly read what he was thinking solely by watching his face, he really had nothing left that was his anymore. He had no privacy to his own thoughts. Did they enjoy that? Did it make them feel better because they couldn't trust him anymore otherwise? Did they truly think him too selfish, choosing himself over the crew's dreams, even if that was never his intention? If they saw it all, every disappointing decision, every ridiculed action, every tumultuous thought, how far off could Hollowell really be? There was no way they had nothing to say about any of it. He had a very vocal crew, after all, so what would they say? How could he face any of them without constantly second-guessing their every motive? Because you trust them, a small voice prodded from the back of Sanji's mind. How fine was the line between being cared for and being coddled, though? How would he know if he was relying on his crew or being a burden? He had thought he'd gotten past this anxiety, but now he remembered where it all stemmed from, and the infirmary door swung open. Heavy boots that Sanji was usually able to hear beforehand stepped through the threshold and paused. Zoro let his hand fall from running through his damp hair. Oh, about time you woke up. There was something so normal about the exchange Sanji wanted to scream. Instead, he grumbled back, about time you took a bath. Zoro closed the door behind him, rolling his shoulders languidly as his neck cracked. Had to wash the blood off. Right. Sanji sighed. He might be wide awake, but his energy levels were lacking. As if on cue, his stomach growled. Right. You haven't eaten in 2 days, Zoro said seriously. You need. I'm fine. Sanji didn't need some overgrown mossball swordsman to tell him what he needed. This is nothing, I've gone longer. Something dark entered Zoro's gaze. I know. Sanji's stomach was feeling more than just the hunger now. The anxiety was back tenfold. I need to know something, he started, swallowing hard. The air shifted. The cook's tension escalated, and Zoro noticed. Noticed the caution, the embarrassment, the uncertainty in the blonde's eyes that seemed reluctant to keep steady on Zoro's own. Stop reading me, Sanji hissed suddenly, pushing himself away from the bed and facing the swordsman head-on like he was expecting a fight. Zoro walked over to him. There was no hesitation in his movements. No room for Sanji to overthink what actions were being taken. Hate to break it to ya, Curly, but I could read that face of yours before all this, he said, hands on either side of Sanji's face, angling his head up toward him. Sanji could only stare, dumbfounded for a moment as he searched for whatever else that Steel Eye was trying to tell him. But then it closed, and Zoro brought their lips together, and the warm pressure melted all the ice in Sanji's veins. Zoro felt the tension ripple over his fingertips as it rolled off Sanji's body. He softened the pressure of his lips on the other's, pulling back just slightly to breathe him in before kissing him again. Those sweet, soft, smoky lips that never failed to call him a name before going down on him. When Sanji was the one who pulled away next, he pulled far enough back to keep his partner at bay. What are you doing? He asked, voice coming out softer than he had intended. The mossball had a way of steadying his shaky soul. Zoro remained relaxed, flirtingly taunting. Saying I can't kiss you now? That's not what I mean, unless it's different. Why does anything have to be different? Sanji pushed away now. Tell me what you saw, curls. Don't pull that shit. Tell me. They stared at each other, neither blinking. Even if I can guess, I have a right to know. Zoro stared evenly at him. Fine. His explanation was brief, the details vague, and certain parts Zoro was quite obviously skimming quickly over, but Sanji got the gist. Got the playback he was afraid of. Everything Hollowell had shown him was there, and then some. When Zoro was finished, he gave the cook a moment before suddenly presenting him with his pack of cigarettes and lighter. Sanji snapped. He snatched them from the swordsman with a huff of reluctance, because of course Zoro knew he needed a fucking smoke. So what now? He demanded. That's it, there was no answer. Sanji met that steel, knowing I again as the first drag of nicotine finally hit his lungs. The Marimo has nothing to say? He's going to pretend he hasn't seen every goddamn thought in my head? Actually, I've got plenty to say. Sanji's body froze by its own volition, even if his expression remained guarded and heated. Zoro's eyes followed the dent Sanji's teeth made in his cigarette before roaming back up to the blue beyond the blonde fringe. But the crew's been waiting for you, and I think you need to hear what they have to say first. Sanji frowned. What? Hey. His wrist was captured in Zoro's grip and he was all but dragged from the infirmary. So much for thinking the brute would coddle him like an eggshell about to break. Which was relieving, Sanji realized. The anxiety of everything else was enough to stifle that bit of feeling though. Shit. How was he supposed to face them after all that? He needed more time to process, he wasn't ready. In seconds the two were out on deck. It wasn't just the brisk evening air that raised the hairs on Sanji's arms. The whole crew was there, already drinking and laughing, focused on the flames of the ignited fire pit. Then, as one pair of eyes noticed the approaching duo, there was a domino effect, until suddenly it was silent and everyone was staring at Sanji. Sanji cleared his throat. It sounded too loud in the silence, his cheeks burned. I don't know what to say, he just needed noise that wasn't the frantic beating of his heart. Yet for some reason he felt like he should be apologizing. His presence had interrupted their good time the same way they had been fore. You don't have to say anything, Luffy said as a grin split his face in two. But that was a normal Luffy expression, and nobody else was saying anything, eyes raking over the cook with 1,000 unspoken words. A million hidden thoughts. Sanji couldn't keep track of every face, and even if he could he knew they were reading him far better than he was capable of reading them. He felt exposed. Violated. And yet still so fucking guilty. That never-ending war within himself was back and stronger than ever. It had never reached this extent before, because before it was only for him. Now everyone knew about it, didn't they? They were reading his thought process like a map. He didn't want this for him, but more so he didn't want this for his friends. Didn't need his demons to take up a single inch of space in their heads, too. Sanji looked down at his feet and forced out an awkward chuckle. Better to try to keep things light for them. Right? So, will you guys be dropping me off at the next island or something? Silence. Sanji looked up at them. You're going to tell me that's ridiculous, aren't you? More silence. Several smiles. Stop staring at me, blink damn it. Luffy bounded forward with a laugh. Haha. You're always so funny, Sanji. That is ridiculous. Why would we do that? But, the captain looked around at the rest of his crew. There is something we want to say. Yes, Brook agreed, stepping forward. There is one thing we do want to let you know. Sanji eyed the violin in his hands. You're not gonna sing it, are you? Oh, yo-ho-ho-ho, I could. Sanji, Robin interrupted before the musical skeleton could act on any ideas. Oh no, don't let it be Robin-chan who breaks the bad news, because it is bad, it's gotta be bad. The ladies saw so much of what he hated about himself and Robin's gentle eyes scrunched at the corners, a sparkle in her irises. We wanted to say that, as Nakama, we are all so very proud of you. Their chef's pale eyes flashed in the firelight. He stepped back, blinked, huh? Chopper hopped to his feet, still on his chair, smiling brightly. It's true, Sanji. I mean, you were already someone I admired so much before. But now it's like, the little doctor stretched his arms out as far as he could. Do you even realize how much you've been through? Nami added questioningly, eyes as bright as the others as she leaned forward in her chair. Not just once, but twice, and here you are trying to laugh with us for our sake. She chuckled. You, Sanji, are one of the strongest people I know. Sanji didn't even care that his mouth was hanging open like an idiot. Every single smile was directed at him and even softer than before. They were warm. embracing. Sanji could curl up in them. He felt like he wanted to. The prospect made him almost dizzy. What was happening? It truly takes some guts, Brook agreed. Not that I would know personally, as I have no guts. Usopp jumped forward next, his pint sloshing over his fingers in his enthusiasm. The way you kept kicking back at the world that was trying to scare you into submission, the sniper said, mimicking one of Sanji's well-versed sweeps of his leg. As a brave warrior of the sea myself, I couldn't stop cheering you on. Definitely saw some of my techniques there that I taught you. He nodded like a proud teacher. Nami used her own Sanji-style kick to the back of the sniper's knees while snapping, "You did nothing." Amidst their squabble, all Sanji's fears felt like a distancing nightmare vanishing over the horizon of reality. His crew was standing up for him, cheering for him, and was Frankie crying? "You can never be replaced, Sanji bro," Luffy laughed loudly. "He's been really waiting to tell you that." "Ah, you don't have to," Sanji stammered. "I don't." "Sanji, it was Jinbei. I wasn't present during your experience. All the crew informed me about was how they felt about you. Even knowing you a shorter amount of time, I wholly agreed." Jinbei beamed at the speechless cook. "The dynamic of Luffy and every single one of you on this crew is a large portion of why I joined. You must know, you are no exception to that." Sanji was at a loss for words. He wasn't lightheaded, he realized. Just light. Like he weighed nothing more than a grain of sand on a salty breeze. He'd never floated like this before. "Look, Sanji," Nami said. "Most of us being this openly verbal about our feelings is probably a one-time deal." "It's awkward as hell," Zoro agreed seriously. "You haven't said anything," Usopp and Chopper grumbled at him through pursed lips and narrowed eyes. Nami continued, "We decided to suck it up anyway and make an exception just this once. For you." She winked. "Besides, not only does the Pirate King need his cook, but my maps won't be complete without the all-blue." Sanji's heart leapt from his chest. You really mean it, Nami Swan?" "MMHMM, but," Chopper quipped in sternly. "If you ever look like you need to hear any of this repeated, we won't hesitate to say it all over again. Got that?" Sanji looked from the little reindeer taking his well-being very seriously to the various expressions of protectiveness and admiration and love, and his throat was suddenly too tight. His heart suddenly too full. They'd seen everything he wanted to forget, yet nothing they were saying felt like an invasion. It felt oddly comforting. It was like their unspoken words. The thoughts in their heads were visible to him for the first time. Because they were letting him in. To thank him. To tell him that he didn't have to be at war with himself any longer. To say that he had found his way into the path of the sun from the shadows of the Windsmokes, and he should allow himself to not only be proud of that fact, but to enjoy it. They were saying they'd be there for him. Always. Not because he was weak, but because they wanted to be. Not because he needed it, but because he deserved it. He deserved love, and he had it. He had them, without a single trick or catch or expectation. Was this what true freedom felt like? He wondered. Like being home, but in someone's heart? "Your eyes are smiling," Robin noted. She sat with her chin resting in her palm, her own lips curved gently as she watched him. She hummed, "You look exactly like your mother." Sanji's hands trembled. It was then he realized Zoro's fingers were still wrapped around his wrist, an anchor. Robin's smile shined brighter, genuine and kind. "Your cooking really cured her heart, you know?" And just like that, Sanji was crying. All he heard was the pounding of feet before there were arms wrapped around him from every direction, all various lengths and sizes. Hands pulling him close. Foreheads bumping into his. Yet still, those anchoring fingers around his wrist never let him go. Until his own started gripping back, and they were palm to palm, interlocked. Sanji tried to wipe at his face with his other hand, but there were too many bodies pressed against him. He could only sniffle pathetically. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry, Sanji." Luffy's rubbery chin lifted from Sanji's head as the familiar weight of a straw hat replaced it. "Robin makes a lot of people cry." "Why, thank you, Captain," came the archaeologist's sweet chuckle, as Usopp mumbled to her, "You can't set him up like that. He's ruthless." Robin only laughed harder. "It's not," Sanji sniffed, chuckled, looked up. He smiled so brightly at his crew, blue eyes shimmering a sunny yellow from the evening fire. A look that a little cook had only for his mother. For the first time, I think I'm just really happy, Sanji confessed. If his voice broke, at least everyone had the good grace to ignore it. He was smothered one more time by them all. Frankie's giant arms wrapping around everyone and lifting them like a packed straw hat snowball, bringing out laughter, screaming, and several futile flails to get free. After being unceremoniously dropped back to their feet, the crew was instantly back to their usual selves, bickering against their cyborg's extravagant embrace. Zoro yanked Sanji away from the chaos when the blonde was almost trampled by Luffy lunging toward the grill screaming about meat, and then Chopper was pulling at Sanji's pant leg, beckoning him to join him and the others by the fire. "Anyway, Sanji," Usopp said, trailing behind the cook as Nami and Chopper pulled him and a still attached Zoro into a seat between them. "I'm really happy you lived through all that. Life on the sea wouldn't be the same without you. It wouldn't taste as good either." "True," Frankie exclaimed. "But tonight sit back and relax, because it's bon appetit from Big Bro Frankie, yow." It wasn't long before a famous Frankie burger was shoved into Sanji's hands, and Luffy and Usopp regaled him in the ways they'd escaped their prison cells and discovered a network of captives forced to work under Hollowell. "Pretty sure most of that was Jimbei," Zoro muttered at one point. "Don't listen to him." Usopp leaned in conspiratorially. He was napping through most of it, as usual. The sniper shrieked, barely managing to dodge Zoro's incoming fist. "I was only under the influence of that woman's devil fruit for 30 minutes, Zoro defended. "Try 2 hours, Nami corrected, unimpressed. "Sanji, we love you, but your choice in a partner is the only thing we really question." Before Zoro could respond, the vicinity was filled with heart bubbles. "You love me, Nami, Swan? Marimo can wait his turn, for my love for you reaches far beyond the moon." A bead of sweat dropped down Zoro's head. Nami sighed before a small smile lit up her face. "You goon," she laughed, tickling the scruff of Sanji's chin. Sanji swooned. "Oi, you're gonna make him pass out again, you keep that up," Zoro griped, his arm being the only thing keeping the squiggling cook upright as he melted from the touch. Nami giggled as Chopper waved his hooves to fan the blonde's face, shouting, "Stay with us, Sanji." "Hey, Sanji," Luffy plopped himself down, mouth full of ribs. "If we ever run into Germa again, I want to help your sister." This line of thought surprised Sanji back from the throes of love. Reiju? Yep, that was all Luffy had to say about it, but Sanji understood. Of course his captain wanted Reiju to be just as free as he was. He wanted that for her too. It would be harder to achieve, and Reiju could be even more stubborn than he was. But Sanji figured that if anyone could pull off miracles, it was his captain. The one person who he already heard everything that needed to be said between them. As if reading his thoughts, Luffy swallowed a mouthful of meat and flashed a big grin. Sanji grinned back. It was a strange feeling, smiling this much after the emotions he'd been feeling previously. The dread. The uncertainty. The humiliation. The hurt. But seeing his captain's grin, the one that promised joy to the world, fully cemented everything else the rest of the crew had said. Everything he'd realized up until now, from the first time he met them all, to Whole Cake, and through Wano, were a manifestation of one simple truth about Nakama. If he could trust them with his future, he could trust them with his past. There was only one person left that Sanji wanted to hear from. It wasn't until the fire began to dim, and the others were drifting off to their respective beds for the night. Maybe there was some alcohol coursing through his bloodstream, too. When he finally got his chance. His head laid in the reclined swordsman's lap, and feeling the blonde's eyes on him, the green-headed brute glanced down. Sanji pursed his lips. Well, what's happening in that algae-covered head of yours? You said you had a lot to say, is it different than the others? Sanji didn't know what he was doing. Zoro had kissed him the moment he woke up. He hadn't let him go since. He'd had clingy moods before, even territorial ones that burned Sanji's hurt with warmth as much as it raised his hackles. But his swordsman clearly had thoughts about things, and Sanji wanted to know. Because, there were certain parts he never wanted Zoro of all people to ever see. He needed to know. Zoro could probably sense his desperation, too. He took a slow swig of booze before finally saying, "Your family's shit." The laugh that exploded from Sanji startled them both, but Sanji didn't let up. "Everything you saw, and that's what you get out of it?" He was chortling. Tell me that wasn't the most obvious part, Marimo. A lopsided smirk played at Zoro's lips. Zeph and your sister I can respect, though. You're a pain in the ass. Sanji's laughing stopped. Remind me to never allow you three in a room together. The lightheartedness faded as something else came to Zoro's mind. You should also know that it's highly likely that Pudding took one of your memories. Sanji's eyebrow quirked. Out of any memory to bring up Pudding, this was unexpected. He cleared his throat nervously. What do you mean? I can't say I'm surprised, it could be a possibility, but what could she have possibly taken? Zoro was silent. Zoro was nervous, Sanji realized. She could have kissed you. In that alleyway, when you were saying goodbye. Silence. Kiss me? Pudding? Sanji smiled softly, amused and unbothered. Yeah right, she hated me. I'm telling you, curls. Zoro rubbed the back of his head. She fell for you. Ya know? There at the end. He paused. She makes more sense for you. Sanji sat up, ran a hand through his hair. Tried to picture what the moss was telling him. It didn't make sense for Pudding to do anything. So why? There were more complicated insinuations if she had stolen something like that from him, but even if she had, he looked back over to Zoro, who was adamantly not meeting his eyes. We make sense, Mossy. I wouldn't have always been so positive about that, sure. But I know now more than ever. The level of trust I have with you, it's hard for me to accept anything good in my life. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that. He chuckled darkly. There always seems to be a catch or a trick. No matter how much time passes, no matter how much I try to convince myself of somebody, there are some people I'd never be able to trust. That doesn't sound like a perfect match to me. But hey, maybe I am a hopeless idiot. No question you're an idiot, Zoro said, the words holding no weight when they were smothered with affection. Sanji snorted. This puts you at a disgusting advantage, he told him, changing the subject. So when I still get the better of you every time, you'll have no excuse to use. I can't wait to watch you flounder. PFT. Delusional as ever, shitty cook, crappy swordsman. Dartboard brow. Cactus head. Their mutual smiles could be seen from the crow's nest. Love cook, Zoro drawled out. Sanji's eyes lowered to his lips, and his smirk grew. He knew he had him. Sanji knew, too. Sanji didn't care. Because here Zoro was. Right here. Having seen everything he'd done to Luffy, having seen everything he'd tried with Pudding, having heard everything his family and anyone else had said about him, and he was still here wrapping an arm around him so tightly. Edging him closer. Knowing where he wanted to take this, there was a moment of hesitation on Sanji's part, as if waiting, one last time, for Zoro to push him away. But he didn't. And Sanji finally wrapped his own arms around the swordsman's waist, hands roaming and digging into the cloth against his ample back, pressing his face into the skin of his neck, holding him like his life depended on it, because maybe it did. Zoro held him back just as tightly. A sigh blew past his lips, rustling Sanji's hair. You thought once that the world dared you to love and then laughed in your face for it. You thought that anyone you attached yourself to would end up seeing you as a disappointment. That you'd never live up to their expectations. That nobody could ever love you, and that you weren't even worth trying to love. Sanji was quiet, and I thought if YHAT then I wouldn't be feeling all these goddamn emotions about you. So, you know, you were wrong. Like always. Zoro was kneed lightly in the crotch before the two were wrestling. Smiles still plastered to their tired, tipsy, terribly love-stricken faces. This shitty musclehead was the real pain in the ass, Sanji thought. But as their wrestling turned to something more intimate, he could also admit that he was one of the driving forces of his strength. He would never lose with Zoro. Will you do something for me? Sanji whispered against Zoro's lips after a few minutes of hot touches. Without a dumbass retort? Fingers swept through blonde hair, petting, caressing. Whenever Zoro showered him with the affection he'd craved for so long, Sanji's soul became weightless. It left him yearning for more. Tonight, he had soaked up so much love he needed a release. Help me forget today, he breathed against the swordsman's cheek. Zoro tilted his head away so he could see the cook's whole face. Help you forget how cared for you are, how much everyone on this ship loves the hell out of you? Not a chance, Arrow Cook. Sanji pouted, fancy brows furrowing cutely, at least in Zoro's unbiased opinion. You know damn well I meant the other shit. Smirking now, Zoro scooped all of Sanji in his arms. Oh, I'll help you forget. And he did. He helped him forget under the mast. He helped him forget at the base of one of Nami's tangerine trees. He helped him forget in front of the aquarium fish. And again against his precious kitchen counters. He helped him forget the most when he had him pinned against the mirror in their cabin, daring his cook to watch himself be loved, fully and without obligation. He helped him remember that feeling every night after. Ooh, if Sanji said nothing had changed since the incident at Hollowell Mine Tech 2 weeks ago, he'd be lying. For one, he couldn't lie about his feelings anymore, even if they were fleeting and non-consequential, and everyone wanted to help. He had to eventually put his foot down that he was allowed to feel the bad stuff sometimes. It didn't mean he was about to fling himself overboard. Calibration, Brooke had conceded, was what needed to be done. A balance between being a friend and being overbearing. For another, there were also weirder instances. Things Sanji couldn't begin to explain even if he wanted to. At the first island they'd made port at, Usopp had manhandled him hurriedly away from a path where a stray dog was idly sniffing at a bush. "Quick, Sanji. This way," the sniper had exclaimed, grabbing his shoulders. "No rabid dog will chase you as long as Captain Usopp is by your side." "The hell are you talking about?" Sanji sputtered in his own cloud of dust. Zoro laughing heartily after them with Chopper giggling atop his shoulders. Of course, it wasn't all bad, or weird. The crew, individually, were more open about their own lives with him. He assured them they needn't feel obligated to share their own harrowing experiences in life just because they were privy to his, but it seemed none of them felt forced. It was like their connection to his past made him more approachable when they needed someone to talk to about their own feelings. It gave Sanji a new perspective. He enjoyed learning the whys of how his crew operated, but above all else he was grateful he was there to offer them an ear to vent to or a shoulder to cry on or words of kindness. Meanwhile, Jinbei had offered Sanji a reprieve when he needed it. When he needed to be around someone who wasn't reading his every thought with scary accuracy. They'd become closer, simply sharing stories of their lives at their own pace. Luffy was the only one who hadn't changed a single aspect. He was always so in tune with Sanji when he needed it most anyway. Zoro was more or less the same way. Sanji dipped his hand into the soapy dishwater and opened the sink drain. As he watched the bubbles swirl for a moment, he thought of one particular afternoon only a couple days after leaving Lunacliff Island far behind them. Zoro and Luffy had been keeping him company while he did inventory. Pretending he wasn't really just there for the snacks, Luffy had brought up Reiju again, which led to a whole assortment of other what-ifs. There was no doubt in Sanji's mind that he and the Vinsmokes would cross paths again someday, and he told them as much. "As long as that name remains on my bounty poster, I'll be a target by their sins." "Don't have to use that name," Zoro had responded. "You can just use mine." There had been a moment where the entire galley was suspended in time. "Rorinoa Zoro, did you just propose to me?" Zoro had sputtered. His face turned red when Sanji wouldn't stop laughing, and then he was chasing after Luffy, who wanted to go tell everyone the good news. Sanji started laughing again, now, as he watched the last of the dishwater curl away. That poor idiot mossball. Didn't he know Sanji was the one who was going to propose to him? And when he did, it would sweep him off those directionally challenged feet of his. Still, there was hope of bringing some romance out of that brute after all, Sanji supposed. 2 arms sprouted from the sink, snatching the dish towel and plate Sanji was drying out of his hands. He wasn't even startled by it anymore. "Have you done anything for yourself today, Sanji?" Robin asked, entering the galley. More delicate hands bloomed, creating a dancing line of dishes. She worked his system expertly by now. "Frankie, Usopp, and Chopper are painting woodworks down below. Nami and I are reading in the library." "Ah, Robin Kwan, how I would love to join you and Nami Swan." Robin smirked knowingly. But, Sanji drooped. "I have a date with the Marimo." Calling it a date was giving it too much credit. Every other night after dinner, Sanji would join the swordsman on the quarter deck to meditate with him. It had taken one bad, panic-inducing nightmare before Zoro had insisted on teaching him his breathing techniques. He claimed it was payback for laughing at his proposal. But Sanji understood what it was meant to do. And maybe he couldn't be too peeved about learning anything from the idiot when it actually was helping him cope with his anxiety. Whatever. Sanji just had to find something to teach Zoro and they'd be even. Could Zoro actually be taught something other than whacking things with swords? Sanji would have to find out. Zoro was waiting for him, already cross-legged at the edge of the stern, their usual spot. Tonight, the sun was slow to set. Zoro was illuminated by the warm light reflecting from the waves. He popped his good eye open when heard Sanji reach the last step. "Ready to breathe?" he asked. Sanji rolled his eyes. Only you could make breathing sound threatening. A vein in Zoro's forehead throbbed when loud yelling erupted from the opposite end of the ship. "I told them to shut up during this time until you're better at keeping focus." "I can focus just fine. What if you're just embarrassed that I'm actually better at this than you?" Sanji hid his mock laugh behind his hand, taunting eyes squinted to mischievous slits. "Not even in your dreams, panic brows." Ankle met blade with blinding speed. "I thought you were trying to be a good Marimo. I thought you were gonna sit down and breathe." A sudden explosion rocked the ship, followed by Luffy's cackling. That's it. Zoro had two swords unsheathed now as he stomped off in a retaliation effort, trailed by his storm cloud of grumpiness. Fitting, Sanji thought, lighting a fresh cigarette and grinning around it. If he'd learned anything in his time as a Straw Hat pirate, there was always a storm somewhere in the skies. A storm that more likely than not would steer itself straight toward the Thousand Sunny. The journey Sanji was on would never consist of calm waters and peaceful winds, but he knew, now more than ever, that he was exactly who he was meant to be all along. He was with the people he was meant to find from the beginning. He listened to the Siewa's Nakama and chuckled to himself. His past might have been revealed, but their hearts would never change. With them, he was happy. With them, he was safe. With them, he was loved.